Are we there?
Yes, we are live.
Okay, this is the April 14th, 2021 board meeting for the Oregon State Marine Board. This is Val Early. I am via phone, and I apologize. I'm still trying to log in. We have currently Craig Withy, I believe, Laura. You're there?
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. Colleen?
I'm here.
And Craig, I didn't hear you.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Vince was not able to come today. He notified us ahead of time that he was not going to be available. So we currently have a quorum, and our meeting, of course, is called to order. Our first order of business here is the board meeting minutes from January 26th to the 27th of 2021. Has everyone had a chance to review those minutes? And I would entertain a motion.
Yes, I've reviewed them and I make a motion that we approve them as presented.
Second.
Is that Colleen?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional comments?
None.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And our next item on the agenda is a request for public comment. And we had no one sign up for the public comment, so we will go ahead and move right on to the next agenda item, which is the item A, Director's Report. So we had quite a lengthy Director's Report. Thank you, Larry. And do you have some updates for us?
Yes, I do, Chair Early. So first, if it makes you feel better on the technology side, I had my camera closed and couldn't figure out why my screen was black. So I'm having my own set of challenges this morning. But for everybody and members of the public, we are using new technology to us this time. It should be a lot better for the public to actually view these meetings. We had a Band-Aid make it work solution for the last year. And we had been after the ability to use some of these live functions. It'll be a lot better for public viewing. For the board members, you may notice what you see on your screen is you can see down on the bottom kind of everything that's happening real time. And probably the big screen with the red box around it is what the public is seeing, which is a little delayed from what you see on the bottom of your screen. So just a pro tip, mentally, you're going to want to decide where to look because you won't be synchronized with the top and the bottom of your screen most likely. So that's just one of the features of this Team Live event. Is sort of feels like one of those movies where the audio is not synchronized to the action. So, but the public is seeing it, and it looks good to them, and the audio and the video is all synced up. So I suggest watching the bottom of your screen if you can do it. So with that, really a few updates just from what we shared, which is the agency budget bill 5020. We had our hearing, that went well. We had some follow-up questions. We are just waiting for the follow-up work session. The budget, the leadership and the legislator put out their framework a few weeks ago for budget. That's generally kind of procedurally how things go. They come out and say, these are the big blocks, and then the subcommittee start filling in the small blocks. And as much as I love the Marine Board, we're one of those small blocks. So the fact that they set out the big framework now probably helps them start thinking about when they want to address us. I think one of the things that could make ours take a little longer to get to is Senator Taylor's very interested in finding some additional money for ADVs. There was the two bills, Senate Bill 740 and 840. Neither one of those moved forward. So she has just yesterday, I think, she had one last bill left to use. And so she has put out a bill she could raise the ADV fund to $1 million. And she has indicated to staff that she's going to go out and try to find some one-time money to fill that account so that we could work on the ADV issue in the coming years. So, a lot of ideas on where one-time money could come from, and that could cause our budget to get pushed off to the end if it's money that everybody else is competing for as well. So that's the budget piece. I don't think we have anything to worry about there. There's the bill that it passed committee a few weeks ago, and it's just waiting for full House approval. That's 2695, the board modification bill. That will most likely get heard while we're actually having this meeting at the full House. And then as a reminder, it has no fiscal, so it goes then over to the Senate side. And we would assume that they would assign it to Senate rules because that's where the corresponding Senate bill on the board is at, but they could assign it to their natural resource committees as well. No indication of where that'll go after it gets out of the House, but it will not need a stop through Ways and Means. And then those are the main. Oh, and then last night, House Bill 2725 that would have done some more modifications to the rules in the Newburgh pool was pulled from consideration and won't be worked further this session. There is a corresponding Senate bill out there. It's 857, I think, is the one that, or 856 is the one that's the corresponding. So that one is assigned to rules. So in theory, it's alive right up till the end of session. So but it was a mirrored bill to 2725, and so not sure how that would proceed from this point forward. And then the only other piece is just, looking statewide on water, which of course is important to boaters. It is shaping up to be an interesting year. We had some pretty good snowpack in the Cascades, but it's going to be, it sounds like, a season of haves and have-nots. So the dry side of the state is really dry. We're not getting a lot of spring rains. So the snowpack kind of in the Cascade area looks like it should hold us up pretty well, but we've got some areas like the Klamath Basin, some of the parts of central and northeast Oregon that are going to be really dry, which is both obviously a fire problem, but for us it could mean reservoirs not getting filled up and is not as much water for folks to go out and enjoy boating. So something to keep an eye on as you're enjoying this 70-degree week and lots of sunshine is that unfortunately this is the time of year we would like a little rain and snow. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Do we have a raise your hand button here?
So I'm just going to call and see if you have any questions. So Craig, do you have some questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. First, Larry,
Okay.
Director Warren. On your recreational opportunities, we talk about the 2020 fire season again. And I'm still wondering how we respond to it. We wait until there is a problem, or are we going out investigating and looking for problems?
So remember, with we are very proactively working with the issue. We're certainly not the lead in a lot of cases on this. So almost I think every watershed now has a group that's actively working on the recreation focus. The Clackamas drainage was a little slow to get organized. I don't know why that was. People were certainly working on it, but there wasn't a one group. And so we've had staff from facilities and boating safety that have been out looking. We're participating in every drainage's recreationally focused groups to learn, how we can more quickly get boaters back out there, but of course with the underpinning that they have to be safe when they do so. And the facility side is offering reminders that we've got grants and different things that we may be able to do to help. And the safety side, you'll hear some later about how they're helping with hazard identification and mitigation. So as much as we can be a part of the conversations to get boating back open, sometimes, for instance, in the Clackamas, we just heard this week that ODOT may not have that road open until late fall. And if you can't get up there, it doesn't matter if the site's open or not. So, those are the kind of challenges that we're facing.
We gave you some authorization previously to respond to these issues. Are you going to need that in the future?
It's possible. Again, each situation's so different, right? And it kind of the crawl before they walk. And in a lot of cases, the facility providers are still just, it's some of the basics of just trying to get the roads open and people's lives restored. But I think as we turn some corners, yeah, we'll start to see some needs arise. And I know, Janine and her group's already probably identified some of those needs.
Well, as this issue develops, I hate to wait for a board meeting for us to respond. And then another question on the engagement. You talk about the need for outdoor access has increased in areas that aren't prepared to provide facilities. So how does the board address that?
Sorry, you broke up there just a little bit.
Yep.
You want me to try it again?
Sure, please.
Under stakeholder engagement, you talk about demand for outdoor access has increased in the areas where we don't have facilities and are not prepared to respond. So my question is, how does the board handle this?
So I think so what we're seeing is, and it makes sense, right, as people move to different areas, particularly, you live in a hotbed area. I can remember when Bend was a small town. I think a lot of people could probably remember when Medford was a small town. And as our population centers shift around the state, we're seeing those demands. And then as different areas get highlighted by the travel organizations and different tourism type organizations, drawing in visitors, and then we find that the facilities weren't designed for that. So I think for the board, where you'll see that is in the discussions around the grant. So June is a grant meeting, for example, with approval, and really being thoughtful about how we think about our facility strategies and where things are going in the future. Where are the Oregon population shifting and who's going to show up and want to use them? And so I think for the board, that the most engagement on that issue will come through consideration of grants. And then staff does work, of course, with all the facility providers, but we also work with those travel organizations. We've got entities in Oregon that are charged with promoting outdoor Oregon tourism. And sometimes they do a great job, but sometimes they forget to ask the people that actually provide the outdoor recreation if they want people to show up somewhere. And so that's a challenge that the state works on, and as staff, we engage in those conversations of trying to help make sure we're promoting areas that either are underutilized or have capability to utilize the folks, as opposed to sending everybody to some really small sites that are not necessarily equipped for it.
Thanks, Director Warren. I really appreciate the update on the projects. It looks like we've completed quite a few of the ones we funded. It would really be nice if we had some photographs to see the completed work. It would be nice if we had a website we could go to that and see the before and after photos. So that's just an idea and a suggestion, but congratulations on completing all those projects. It's really super that we're putting our money to use and getting facilities up to speed for our public. So thank you.
Yeah, and Janine Black has been working on redesigning the website. Well, not single-handedly, but we're doing an effort on that. And I know redesigning the facility website is part of that. And I know we do document and have photos. So that's a good suggestion, and I'm sure something that we can accommodate and may already be accommodating in certain ways.
I have another question to kind of build on what Member Withy just mentioned, and I'm glad Janine is there too. Along the lines of the facilities discussion, I've heard some really good things from people out in public about the Verde videos. How do we as board members get to see them?
Great question. They're actually on the board's YouTube, and I can send links out. We are actively working with them. They're gearing up to have the What is a Boat, a trip planning, a registration one, and they've just started on a boating under the influence and a informational one for liveries, kind of going through that dockside checklist to help educate. And then I anticipate also a coastal navigation bar crossing one to be coming out as well. But I will send the link to the board's YouTube. That's where we've been loading them at. And then to member with these comment about the photos, that is something we are working on. We recognize that we don't do a very good job of promoting the things that we are doing or where we're spending voter dollars. So we are working on a map that will highlight all of our historic grants, include photos. It'll be a filtered forum where they'll be able to search by the biennium, the water body, the owner, and the type of funding. And I'm actually going to be sending a link out on it after the meeting when we load the Cycle 1 grants. Previously, the board had asked for a map showing all the locations of the grants under consideration. And so we're going to make this a public-facing map. So the board will have access to it, and it will be set to the current biennium. And you'll also be able to look at historic stuff. So we're working on it. As always, we're always stretching for resources to get stuff done, but we've recognized the need and we're trying to get it out there to show voters where their money's been going.
Thank you, Janine.
You're
Any
very
other
welcome.
questions, Laura?
Well, I got another one on the voting obstruction reporting tools. I think that's an exceptional program. How do we let the public know the existence? How do they get involved
Sure.
with it and utilize it?
And that is part of Brian Paulson's presentation. It's been a multi, all parts of the agency have been working on that, but it's part of his presentation during the law enforcement portion on item, I think it's C, or D, sorry. So I think you'll learn more about it there, Member Withey, in terms of how folks will know about it, where they see it, and what it's all about.
Great. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Laura?
I think we're good.
Colleen?
No questions.
Just as a side note, I have seen a news article about a new dip tank for aquatic invasive species down at Lake Havasu that should cut the decontamination time on a boat to within 10 minutes. And it's a hot water dip tank. I don't know if you have seen that or if somebody else has seen that article. It's pretty interesting.
Shirley, I saw that article. It is interesting, and it's one of those, I know folks that boat in locations where they have to go through those decons will really appreciate any technology that makes that go faster.
Definitely. Okay, so I think that we are finished unless there are any other updates with the director's report. Director Warren, if there's nothing else, we'll move forward.
I'm done, so move on. Yeah.
Okay, we are going to move to, and just as a side note, I can now see everybody, but now I have the delay. So I'll keep moving forward here, and we're on item B, the Facilities Grant 1672 Westport, and Janine Bullock, you are up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Early, members of the board. For the record, my name is Janine Bullock, and I'm our Boating Facilities Program Manager. I want to confirm, Steve Meschke, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So Steve Meschke is the Parks Director with Clatsop County. He's been in front of the board at previous meetings. So we're now going to make a recommendation to fund the construction portion of the Westport boating facility. The county has provided a considerable amount of match, and we're very fortunate that the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has pledged $1 million of their federal sport fish restoration funds toward this project. We anticipate construction is going to begin this summer, and if the weather is favorable, we want this project done before the end of this year so that boaters can enjoy it. So staff is going to recommend funding through a few different sources, and that will be $379,825.25 of our boating facility grant funds, $100,000 in waterway access grants, and $200,000 of federal boating infrastructure grants to match a total of $1,595,921.75 of matching resources. Steve, do you have anything to add?
No, just the county's excited about this, you know, just talking to the commissioners and the county manager and just all the people, a lot of local fishermen, everyone's been anxious to get this done for years, and we're ready to move forward.
So is there
Okay,
any questions?
So
Yeah, this is
Janine,
great.
just out of curiosity, this is a round one grant?
Yes, yes. So this is a conditional approval pending our budget approval. We have done this before for City of Reedsport Rainbow Plaza, and we've done this for Oregon Youth Conservation Corps grants when we would award those. And this is a conditional award. This allows the county to go through the bidding process and get a contractor all lined up to begin work in July when our budget is approved.
And so what is the total amount that we have available for funding in our round one?
I anticipate having about 2.4 to 2.5 million of our motorized dollars, about $500,000 of non-motorized, and then we'll also have about $500,000 of Clean Vessel Act and $200,000 of boating infrastructure funds.
Thank you. Craig, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. We approved grant 1670, I believe, in the last board meeting. Are there going to be more grants for this project beyond the one we're considering today?
I do not anticipate any additional grants for this.
So grant 1670, the work has been completed?
For the materials purchase, everything has been ordered. We're just waiting for things to get delivered, and they'll have until June 30th to have them delivered.
And what do you anticipate for the construction period on this? How long will it take to complete the project?
I think it will be done if the fall weather is good by the end of October, maybe beginning of November.
I see your timeline here says end of December, so, but you're trying to get some work done so that it can be used this summer.
Yeah, it's not going to be usable this summer. They're going to have to just tear everything out, and the in-water work window starts this summer. So we want to get all the in-water stuff completed and then work the upland area. I gave to December, and that way we have a chance to get all the final invoices, any punch list items that may be hanging out there.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions, Laura?
I don't have any questions.
Or Colleen?
No questions.
So
If there
I'd
are
like
no
to make-
further questions, go ahead, Laura.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve grant 1672 in the amount as broken out in the board book for the different monetary sources.
I second.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the staff recommendation conditionally approving according to the board book and legislative approval for the agency's 21 to 23 budget. And then, of course, all of the grant funds coming from the various portions. Is there any further questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Congratulations, Steve. And as soon as we hear back from the legislature on our budget, you'll be moving forward.
All right, well, thank you very much for the support. You know, it's been a long project. Like I said, we started this talk back in 2004, and we're finally getting there. So everyone's excited to get this moving. So thank you again.
We'll move on to item number C, which is Facilities Grant 1640, the Port of Arlington cost increase. And Janine, it's still your turn.
All right. Peter, are you on the line? Peter?
We may have got to him sooner than he thought we would.
He also could be having some technical issues. He's had some challenges with his connections. So I will do my best to represent and answer any questions the board would have. So the Port of Arlington has been working to secure additional funds. And from all accounts, they thought they would have had the funds between their resources and from the Columbia Gorge Wind and Water Association. And unfortunately, COVID really put a damper in their fundraising. And so they were only able to contribute $5,000. But the port was still moving forward. They were looking for other sources to reduce their portion of the match and share it amongst other grant applicant or grant resources. And they weren't successful in one Travel Oregon grant. They are applying for a second Travel Oregon grant, and it does look like it will be favorable. But the prices also came in high, and we're seeing increased prices just about on every avenue. And so the port and their consulting engineer worked to reduce the cost, and they did a really good job of negotiating some items and reduced it down by almost half. But they just don't have the capacity to absorb that additional money. So they are requesting some funds from us to help share that cost increase. And after some further discussions with the port, staff felt that it was a very reasonable price considering where the bids are coming in, not just for us, but across other state agencies and local governments are seeing higher prices. And so staff is recommending an increase of $37,500 to match a port increase of $16,271. Are there any questions?
Yeah, this is Member Withy. How much money has the board already expensed on this project?
To date, we have not spent anything. The port has not requested any reimbursements.
Well,
Thank you. Are there other questions? Go ahead, Craig. Sorry.
If there's no other questions, I make a motion that we approve this funding request in an amount of $37,500 as staff has recommended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the Port of Arlington facilities grant cost increase, grant number 1640. Any additional comments or questions?
None.
I just comment myself that, you know, a lot of everything has gone up recently. It was not surprising to see that the bids all came in so much higher than what they were expecting. So all those in favor of the motion to approve the cost increase, please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Janine.
Thank
And
you.
good luck to the good luck to the Port of Arlington. We hope that that project continues to move along.
Thank you very much, Chair Early and members of the board.
So we're going to move on now to the Marine Law Enforcement Program. This is a wonderful PowerPoint, and so we'll turn this over to Randy Henry.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Thumbs up.
Yes.
All right. So we've got, again, one of our spread out technological achievements underway, and it looks like we are in good shape. So fire it up, Brian. Brian Paulson is at the helm of the Starship Marine Board at this moment, running the PowerPoint. So thank you, Brian, for doing that. So to get this started here, I mean, I think I first sort of came up with the idea to want to do a general law enforcement presentation about a year ago. And I wanted to do that for several reasons. We've got a number of newer faces on the board, and the law enforcement program encompasses a lot of activities. It is very much an animal of the statutes, both federal and state. And there's a lot of, I mean, pretty much everything we do is determined through statute and through a rule. And that drives a lot of our day-to-day decision making, a lot of our activities. So I wanted to just give a kind of a rounded background, not the level of detail that we saw with the Life Jacket campaign, but something that helps you understand our program and helps us move through it. So I can, Brian, I can click, right? Okay, so the agenda roughly, or the agenda overview is a little bit of an overview of the Marine Board LE program. I did want to go step through the statutes briefly to talk about how they structure us and how our program is structured. A little bit of a historical review. I wanted to spend some time talking about our business model because when I've talked to board members in the past, there's always questions about how we determine funding and how those funds are allocated. And then the performance monitoring piece is an ongoing internal discussion. I'd certainly be interested in board feedback on that. And then just kind of a discussion, pros and cons. You know, the program we have is the program we work with. Does that mean it's the way the program should be till the end of time? I think it should evolve over time, and that's a interesting discussion in itself. So if I'm lucky, there you go. So statutes that drive our program. Okay, starting at the most basic level, 83100 boating safety policy. It is the policy of this state to promote safe boating for persons and property in and connected with the use, operation, and equipment of boats, and to promote uniformity of laws relating thereto. So that's really important because the language there talks about uniformity of laws. To me, that means several things. One of the big things is uniformity across the country. So you see a lot of federal reference in our statutes. You see language that says we will mirror federal statutes for carriage requirements and things like that. Certainly the federal government, U.S. Coast Guard maintains authority over that and doesn't want us to deviate from certain laws that they have enacted. They hold preemption authority. So we have to consider that when we look at new laws, when bills are going through the legislature, when we're enacting rules and that sort of thing. But also beyond national consistency is consistency within the state. And even beyond consistency of the regulation to make sure that slow no wake means the same thing in Jackson County as it does in Umatilla County. Are they enforced the same? Are officers getting the same type of training county to county and across the state? And then the step beyond that is worth its own discussion is our programs, our funded law enforcement programs through the counties each have their own philosophies, I guess, on enforcement. Sheriffs are elected officials. They provide direction to their staff. and that changes the face of how some of our rules and laws are enforced at the local level. So that's another point of discussion. Okay, 830.035, peace officers. Peace officers to enforce the chapter. Fleeing and attempts to elude. Fleeing, attempts to elude are a pretty minor piece of this. I can't tell you the last time, maybe once every 3 or 4 years we actually see somebody having to get chased down on the water, but that's a really small piece of what we do. But it does give authority to any peace officer to do that. And any peace officer can enforce the marine laws. The practice, the statute itself reads that the sheriff of each county and all peace officers. So it certainly calls out the county sheriff's programs. But all peace officers shall be responsible for the enforcement of this chapter and any regulations made by the State Marine Board. That's important too. I don't know the history of that. I haven't dived too much into the original legislation there, but certainly sheriffs are called out as a primary player with other peace officers specifically included. Our structure is currently built where sheriff's offices are the primary delivery of our enforcement mechanism, with a good partnership with Oregon State Police too. Okay, stolen boat, lost boat. So this references, this is sort of interesting because this happens most of the time in the background. You don't get a lot of information on this, but it's interesting that in statute, notification of stolen boat is hardwired into the system. On a weekly basis, we get notifications from county, from municipal police departments, from sheriff's departments, from state police that will tell us that a boat was reported stolen. And the goal there is for us to record that in our boats database to flag that registration. As an investigation continues or as that boat is missing, that somebody doesn't come along and register it later. So that's something that's hardwired in. Those come into the office. Naomi here at our in our Outfitter Guide program and the boating safety program will enter that into the database. So we do track those specifically. Okay, consistency with federal law. As noted, this is also hardwired into our statute. So we have some tough discussions sometimes internally and with constituents who really think that we should either not be in line with federal law or we should be maybe more restrictive than federal law. We hear this a lot with Outfitter Guide issue where some of the fishing guides are going way out into the ocean in open aluminum boats, and other folks might feel that they should be required to carry additional equipment. Because those boats are functionally managed as recreational boats, we have virtually no latitude to depart from U.S. Coast Guard requirements. They hold preemption on that, and they've asserted that over time. I'm sorry, here a little bit. There you go. So that falls back to our navigation laws, our registration requirements, and many other statutes and rules directly reflect federal law. Coast Guard guards its federal preemption authority carefully, and in doing so can withhold our federal grants if we deviate from them. This has also manifested itself in things like the invasive species surcharge that we charged for years. As the U.S. Coast Guard began to take notice that a number of states were doing that, they refocused their efforts to make sure that the fees we charge are specifically limited to boat registration and titling, things that are allowed within federal law. And because of that, they sort of took some additional interest in what states were doing. This one is interesting. I'm not sure if most board members are aware of this compact. Probably you are to some degree, but this always plays a really important discussion about our border waters. So anytime we pass a law or a rule or go out to enforce laws or rules on the Columbia River and the Snake River, we have to consider the Tri-State Compact. This goes way back and is, basically a decision that says if you're boating on the water, you don't want to have to know exactly where that dotted line is down the middle of the river, because obviously there is no dotted line. So the law sets up that consistent laws can be enforced by either by enforcement officers from either state from shore to shore. So if if both states, say Oregon and Washington, have a life jacket requirement, either officer can enforce it. Where it gets interesting is if both states do not have the same law, then it sort of falls to the lowest common denominator. One example there is in Idaho, they have a different age limit. I believe it is I think it's 14 years in Idaho. 14 and under must wear a life jacket, or 13 and under. In Oregon, it's 12. So law enforcement, shore to shore, sort of enforces the lowest common denominator of that. When we discuss things like in the past, the AIS permit, that'll come to play with waterway access permit on some of the border waters. We have to look carefully at how we can enforce that without getting crosswise with Washington. Okay, 831.10, it's one of our basic encompassing statutes, is where our program gets its sort of structure in managing the county contracts. So that's the one that says we have authority to make contracts. It actually directs Marine Board to make contracts necessary to carry out the provisions of the law. And we are to advise and assist county sheriffs and other peace officers in the enforcement of laws related to boating. This is a big piece of statute that defines a lot of what we do. A couple of the things to the law enforcement, a couple of key things to the law enforcement program is items 4 and 5 of that law. 4 says we make contracts necessary to carry out the provisions. Therefore, we have implemented 32 separate contracts or interagency agreements with county sheriff's offices and also with Oregon State Police to implement the law. Number 5 is that we will advise and assist county sheriffs and other peace officers. And that really comes down to our training program. That's where we find, I think that's where we base our extensive training program. You can't have officers out there implementing a very specialized area of enforcement. They have to have the skills to be both competent and capable. So that requires extensive training. So in our partnerships with the counties, we require them to give us sworn officers who are already, sworn police officers and have the basic police skills. And then we are tasked with training them, helping them understand how to operate their boats. In advising and assisting, we're also use that to provide equipment through the grants process and ongoing support at several levels. So when you look at some of the extensive programs we provide to the counties, that's where that authority comes from. Of course, another
Randy?
thing yes.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Because I just wanted to check and see if anybody had any questions, if they could just ask them along the way.
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
I'll try to pause.
So,
I'll pause more between slides and ask if there's any questions.
Well, you're doing a good job of pausing. I just didn't know if anybody knew that they could just, jump in and ask a question if they had one. Does anybody have any questions thus far?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, keep going.
All right, jump in anytime. 704.510. So this is a different statute than ORS 830. 704 is specifically there for the Outfitter Guide Program. There is an entire history around the Outfitter Guide Program and all the work that we've done over the last 20 to 30 years on that, and especially the last 10 to 11 years. But if you dive into that statute, you see what we're doing to manage outfitter guides across the state. The reason I put it into this presentation is we use that statute to leverage funding for law enforcement. So with Oregon State Police, we fund a full-time officer in their Special Investigations Unit to help us look for illegal operation and address those sorts of things. So that's an additional contract with Oregon State Police specific to the Outfitter Guide Program.
Hey, Randy.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want you to get away with not having any questions, so here's one for you.
Okay.
You talk about the relationship with other state law enforcement what's the relationship with the Coast Guard? You're dealing with navigable waters in a lot of what we're looking at here.
Okay, great question. How do we, what is our relationship with the U.S. Coast Guard? That's actually another slide, so I'm going to defer your question till I get to the MOU with the U.S. Coast Guard because I dive into that. And then if you have any additional questions, we'll go back to it there, but that provides a little additional context if that's okay. Is that all right?
I'll go back and see if I can think of another question.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, so Marine Law Enforcement Program. So now I'm going to dive into the actual program here at the Oregon State Marine Board a little bit. You know, as I noted in statute, we are a creature of statute, as our AG keeps reminding me. And in statute, we are directed to address boating accidents. And that comes down directly from our federal partners. That's part of the reason we exist, is to investigate boating accidents. I do note that in statute it says accidents. Internally, we use the term incidents. Accidents is kind of an antiquated term that implies sort of serendipity, whereas incidents, most crashes come back to somebody making a poor decision, and that's a different kind of issue. Obstructions management is something that's mentioned in statute as well. Our education programs is enshrined in statute rather broadly. And then, of course, the law enforcement contracts. These are the programs that I wanted to dive into more today. Okay, boating accidents. So at this current time, we have Mary Ann McKenzie tasked with managing the reporting of boating accidents. I made that switch several years ago. The reason that we track boating accidents is because one of the primary purposes of our existence is to study what's going out there on the water and develop interventions to make recreational boating safer. And you can't do that if you're not looking at the incidents as they occur, doing investigations, doing some analysis, and then looking at how you present that back to the boating public so they don't make those mistakes in the future or make those decisions. So enshrined in statute is the duties of operators and witnesses at accidents. This is similar to what you'd see in the Motor Vehicle Code. Requirement to file an accident report. So if you're involved in a fatal or injury accident, you have 48 hours to get that report to the Oregon State Marine Board. It defines a form that we're supposed to put out there, confidential nature of reports. So this is interesting in state government. Motor vehicle accidents aren't nature like this, or aren't confidential like this. In the boating world, again, mirroring federal law, if I get in a boating incident, if I crash my boat into somebody else and I am required to fill out a incident report, that report is confidential. It can't be used in any court of law or against me. And the goal with that is to try to get unbiased, information from the boating public. I mean, I could literally turn in my report and say I was completely drunk and hallucinating and ran over that person, and that could not come back. That should not anyway enter into the courts or into enforcement. That stays confidential. We can't even give it to the insurance companies. I can't even release that back to the individual who reported it, who sent that report in. I can do some summary of stuff, and I can put that information into a spreadsheet and do a year-end analysis. What isn't confidential, we've decided more recently, are reports that are additional reports, investigations done by local law enforcement or Marine Board staff. Of course, report of an accident resulting in death or disappearance and the duties of a passenger is another thing that's outlined in there. Excuse me. A little bit here. Another reason that we spend so much time on the boating accident tracking is, again, that data tracking, helping us look at trends and statistics over time. From that directive, we produce an annual incident statistics publication. This has remained pretty much unchanged since going back to the 70s, I think. So it's a useful way to kind of come down here and look at number of registered boats, number of reported boating incidents, number of fatalities, and so forth over time. But the information is also fed into the Federal Boating Accident Reporting System or database, and that allows national tracking, which is useful. There is a dashboard at one of the federal websites or the National Association of State Boating Law Administrator websites, where you can go on and click through and look at data state by state from across the U.S. over time. And that data comes directly from our reports. Obviously, the federal government wants it to be accurate, so those reporting systems are accurate. Those reporting systems come back out in the U.S. Coast Guard annual reports on fatalities and accidents, and that's how they track national outreach efforts to try to manage that. Did I hear a question out there?
Yeah, Randy, this is Craig again.
Yep.
How do we interact with the National Transportation Safety Board when there's an accident, especially when there's a fatality?
Yes, good question. And I don't have a slide on that in the future. So the answer to that is they become involved in transportation incidents, accidents that involve, I think, 6 or more fatalities. That might not be correct, but generally there is some quantity there. So in Oregon's case, the last time I recall them sending a crew out for an on-the-ground investigation was when the Tacky 2 capsized at Tillamook back in 2002 or 3, I think, because there were a number, 10 or 11 fatalities with that one, I think, and there was a pretty broad investigation after that. That had pretty significant ramifications for the agency as well. They track, actually, there's a whole history with NTSB. It was an NTSB report that initially pushed for national education standards for recreational boating, because behind traffic accidents, it was one of the higher causes of transportation fatalities in the U.S. So it was back in, I think, the early 1990s, where NTSB came out and said states and the U.S. Coast Guard need to begin looking at tracking boating incidents and boater education. So I don't have a day-to-day relation with NTSB, but in large incidents, they will become involved, and they come in as a federal partner often does with their own crew and their own equipment. They will liaison with local law enforcement in the investigation, but it becomes kind of their show, and they tend to take it over. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay. Education programs. So again, this is a big piece of statute. Boating safety and education is the route that we would all like to go towards safer boating in the state. Everybody would like to know that the other guy behind the wheel of the boat has some basic understanding of boat operation, navigation skills, safety, and so forth. I was hired in April of 1999, and 2 weeks later, the mandatory boater education law was voted into existence, and I almost considered going somewhere else because I thought that was going to be such a hard sell. I really think it is the cornerstone of boating safety in Oregon. It has done a lot to engage boaters, to get them to think about safety, and move recreational boating forward. That doesn't mean that it should remain static, and I hope that the program can continually evolve over time. But that is described in there. It also describes youthful boat operator program. That language is holdover from earlier days when there were voluntary courses, but we do maintain a junior boater program, and we certainly reach out to you through our county sheriff's officers and other partners to take boating safety information to the public. Education programs, we got mandatory education. In 2020, we issued 12,800 cards, about 3,000 replacement cards. The Towed Water Sports Education Program was new last year, 602 Towed Water Sports decals and 405 education cards. We suspended in-person classes in 2020, but we are doing the online video edition of an in-person class right now, and they're going very well. I actually am pretty pleased with Marianne and Marianne's efforts and NASBLA. working with NASLA to get certification, working with her Coast Guard auxiliary partners to be able to do a good facsimile of an in-person course online. It's still a minority of people who choose their education this way, but each of the classes is filling up. We're doing several at a time right now. And I think it's a really good opportunity and offers a great flexibility for the boating public too. Waterway obstructions. So this is a key topic right now. We're dealing with more obstructions than we've ever dealt with. Brian's going to go into more detail on this here. Actually, I'm about to turn it over to him for a little bit. But I did want to note that the 830.160 is where we reference that authority, board authority to remove obstructions from water. And it is interesting to note, and we have to keep this in mind, that the State Marine Board may, not shall, but may cause the removal of any obstruction consisting of logs, rocks, and other debris that occur from natural events. Okay, here's the wording, or other debris resulting from natural causes from the waters of the state, if the board finds the obstruction to be an extraordinary hazard to boating safety. So the key words there is we may do this, and it needs to be an extraordinary hazard to boating safety. That term extraordinary is really key. We do not want to, because of statute, be in the business of pulling out every potential obstruction and hazard in the waterways, because that's what waterways are. That's how they're built. That complexity is important for a lot of reasons. So we limit that to the extraordinary hazards where it becomes clear, or with the recognition of our marine law enforcement partners out there, that a tree across the river is probably going to kill somebody. That's where we sort of embrace that term extraordinary, and we will take action to address that through any number of ways. So with that, Brian, are you in a place where you want to take over?
Yes, thank you, Randy.
All right, how about it?
Good morning, Chair Early, members of the board. For the record, this is Brian Paulson, Waterways Coordinator for the Oregon State Marine Board. So Randy just reviewed the authority that the Marine Board may cause removal of any obstruction from waters of the state if found to be an extraordinary hazard to boater safety. And those obstructions, such as logs, root wads, rocks, or other debris that are resulting from natural causes. So there's really a few mechanisms that we have for the program. One is reporting. So the obstructions are reported generally if the waterway is used by recreational boats, and that's either motorized or non-motorized. And then the mitigation aspect. So selective removal of obstructions is based upon the frequency of use, the location, and also the ability to safely mitigate. One thing I want to go over is how that reporting piece is taking place today. So prior to February of 2021, waterway obstructions since 2018 were generally reported by law enforcement through our Survey 123 app that we had created. Some of the challenges with that was getting a broad spectrum of the obstructions that are out there. Now, keep in mind, our law enforcement are spread pretty thin. So them being on the water and seeing these obstructions and being able to report them was a small piece compared to the amount of obstructions that were reported to me through email from the public, through outfitter guides, through boating interest groups. So the thought came to mind, especially after the increase in wood in the rivers from the wildfires in September, is to have this mechanism for the public to be able to report to us of an obstruction, because they're out there boating on the waterway significantly more than our law enforcement is out there, especially on the rivers. And so put together some thoughts on that, and a group of us here at the Marine Board worked together and created our boating obstruction reporting tool. So going over this kind of flow chart to be able to explain things, the law enforcement piece is not much different than what it was in 2018. We have our Survey 123 app that each one of our 32 county sheriff programs has a login. They use that Esri login. They go in, do the survey, it's submitted, and it posts it onto our feature layer of our Boat Oregon online maps. Now with the public, we wanted to make it easy. We wanted to make it convenient to report these because in the past, I would just get the information through an email, and generally it took a couple follow-up emails to get enough information and be able to post it. So we use Quick Capture, which is another ArcGIS Esri program that complements Survey 123. It is quicker, and we were the first state agency to kind of pioneer this idea of having the public provide information to us and then use it for a feature layer. One thing that I do want to make quick note is that we review any information that comes in from the public. It doesn't automatically get posted to our feature layer maps where law enforcement automatically posts it. So we have the Quick Capture app that is very intuitive, and then also the public can use or outfitter guides or other stakeholders can use a Survey 123 that's catered towards the public. It's a little bit more basic than our law enforcement. And if there's any questions, please feel free to ask them at any time. So how does somebody find out about the boating obstruction reporting tools? Well, there's 2 online resources. We have our Boat Oregon online maps, which within that feature layer shows the obstructions by the international hazard sign there. And then we also have our reported obstructions on Boated Waterways hub. And so within this hub, you'll find our user guide. And really QR codes are a great technology piece because it takes somebody right to where they want to go to a PDF. It takes them right to an app. And by using this QR code that we have on our hub, it'll automatically pull up this Quick Capture app, and the person from the public can download the app. It's free. They don't need any credentials or logins, such as our law enforcement, and they are able to review the user guide and know how to report the obstructions. And the nice thing about our app is it's very simple. All you need is an email. And the reason we use the email as a user is when they report that obstruction, not only does it send an email to me so I know who submitted, but I also have their email for follow-up questions if I need it. This is kind of giving you an overview. Once you scan that QR code, it automatically pulls up that Quick Capture, app you can download on iOS, you can download it on Apple iPhone. You scan the QR code, you put in your username, and then you have the app right there. So we wanted to make it easy. So say you're going down the river, it's river right, the obstructions, you take a picture of it and provide the details. It submits it to me. I have the geospatial data. Within that user guide, it talks about nomenclature. So most, experienced boaters are going to know what's river right, what's river left, what's center. So within that user guide, we explain things. So when we're getting information from the public, that they're providing that information correctly on how we decipher it for an obstruction. Within that user guide, we also explain the Survey 123 portion of the public. And then also, one really neat thing is we worked with American Whitewater to have a whitewater version of this, because the boated waterways in Oregon have really expanded. And one thing that American Whitewater has is they have these built-in sections. So for instance, on this slide, it shows the Wilson River, I think I chose the Wilson River. So it shows Butte Creek Falls. It shows the sections that generally the kayakers or rafters or anything of that nature are going to be using. And so we wanted to have that option for the whitewater enthusiasts to be able to show which section that obstruction's in, and then also show the CFS, the flow at the time of the recording, because generally with whitewater kayaking, things of that nature, the CFS is very important, whether the water's flowing enough to go through that section or if it's too high, those type of things. So within our public reporting tools, we have the Quick Capture, and then we have the 2 surveys, the all boaters, and then we have the whitewater specific. So the way it works is that surveys submitted, whether it be law enforcement or through the public, and then we've initiated what are called webhooks. So the webhook notifies staff. So myself and 2 other staff members will get an email that shows that there's a survey submitted. It shows the water body, the county, the location, the description, the risk to the boaters, who submitted it, and then I can go into the manager section and review it. Now, the individual who submitted the survey from the public will also get an email thanking them for reporting obstruction, showing them the resources, and really giving them an additional communication channel to get back to us. So the waterway obstructions, when it comes from the public, I review them. And the reason we have a review process was to make sure that we weren't getting information from the public that potentially could be incorrect, misleading on a obstruction or hazard. So we have that review process, and once I hit approve, it takes that information. Generally, I edit the descriptions to get them a little more congruent with how we report things on our obstruction map. And then it automatically places that information on the map. Much more efficient than in the past when I would have to filter through emails, then go in and make the post. So it is definitely a time saver for us. It also engages the public. Now this waterway obstruction map, really, to kind of put it in boater terms, is kind of like Trip Check, which ODOT has available for motorized vehicles. So it's really a neat thing for boaters to be able to go on there and see where the obstructions have been reported. And really this project, which we just went live with in early February, was in response to the wildfire debris in waterways and really the impact of boating safety. This allows boaters, stakeholders, partners to be able to report waterway obstruction information to the agency efficiently. And it also allows a mechanism for us to have a simple tool to be able to understand where these obstructions are at and look at cumulatively where we have a water body that's having a lot of wood, especially from the wildfires. And another piece of this is, so we have the reporting piece, which I just went over, and then also signage. So a lot of times when we get an obstruction that is definitely higher up there on the risk level, we want to make sure we have signage upstream. So we design the sign that is QR code. So if somebody has obviously cellular service, it's going to be able to take them to that reported obstruction map, but also it's going to let them know that there's been a reported obstruction in this area and that they should be aware of it. We also have our hazard ahead signs. Generally we place upstream, especially when the sight line going into an obstruction isn't as great, especially on a corner or high current situation. Obstruction mitigation and removal is really a high risk activity, especially over water. Some of our programs have the experience, skills, and required training to complete this, but oftentimes a professional contractor is used. And I will say, since we rolled out these tools in the first part of February, our obstructions went from 59 to 84. Now, as of yesterday, we're 82 unreported. So it really has engaged the public on reporting these, and it's really gave us a good idea of what's out there. Now, most of the obstructions, we don't take action on removal, as Randy pointed out earlier. It is something that has to be an extraordinary hazard to life safety. Generally, we'll work with a landowner or ODFW or ODOT or somebody to figure out a solution instead of going out of there and just plucking out, the tree out of the water unless it's an excessive life safety event. Back to you, Randy.
All right, thank you.
Unless there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brian. One thing about the program right now is this is a level of reporting capability that we've never had before, and it's a product of both technology, staff being willing to apply that technology, as well as the unique circumstances we find ourselves in. It is also a dance that we do with obstructions because an obstruction or a hazard is kind of in the eye of the beholder, and we have to just be very careful where we draw those lines. So it's a challenging thing. Enforcement contracts. So this is referencing again ORSA 3140. This is where we get the authority for our contracts and also for our training program. So moving along here. Jump into the law enforcement training program. This is a program right now that is overseen by Eddie Persichetti. Most of you have met him or heard from him. He does a great job with it, and at this very moment, despite just getting his COVID second shot and not feeling great, he's leading a training session with some deputies towards their captain's license. That's one of the trainings that we offer our Marine partners. So we train 32 counties and OSP to be certified Marine Patrol. We Eddie takes pride in offering some sort of training every month of the year with different aspects of it. The major programs are the 2-week academy coming up here in about 2 to 3 weeks, a week of drift boat training, a week of jet boat training. We also partner with some other fire and rescue offices for Swiftwater Rescue 1 and 2 training. We conduct an annual preseason meeting, an annual postseason meeting, except for maybe during COVID, where we conduct training as well. And then we also throw special operations sort of into the training camp because it's an opportunity to bring programs together and focus on specific skills and specific issues. BUII saturation patrols, we've got several planned for this year coming up, and we've done make way, special operations, and other things. The annual 2-week academy, it's really our flagship training for the year. There is a lot of effort that goes into this because when you've got new officers who are new to boats, you really have to do some intensive focus with them. So we have a high instructor to student ratio. In the classroom, not so high, but when they're on the boat, it'll be 1 instructor to 2 students. It's 9 days of training, 2-day classroom, 1-day pool session. The pool session is great. We've got it coming up, and if anybody's interested in attending, please let us know. We'll make room for you. The pool session's a lot of fun because that's where we take somebody who's who may be new to the boating scene. We load them up with their duty belt and all their gear, and then we throw them in the pool and let them sink to the bottom and hope the life jacket brings them back up. It's an eye-opening training opportunity. 6 days. Yes.
I just want to endorse this training, and I encourage other board members to attend it. I had the privilege to go to it the last 2 years. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it this year, but I really encourage other board members to attend it. It is excellent training. It builds a relationship between the board and law enforcement. And frankly, I got probably more out of it than any other exposure I've had to law enforcement that I can recall. So I encourage other board members to attend, and I think you'll get a whole lot out of it. And it helps the board build a relationship with our law enforcement partners.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate that. Or thank you, Board Member Withy. I appreciate that. Any other questions related to the academy?
Okay. This is Val.
Sure.
I'd just like to say that, you know, the adjustments that you guys made last year with the online and the virtual training was really incredible. And I would echo what Member Withy has said also. Your crew is really incredible, Randy.
Well, thank you, Chair Early. I really do appreciate that. I hope they're watching. I get to, for the most part, sit back and watch them do their magic, and they do just a really good job, especially the last few years. The amount of sort of inter-program cooperation and effort that goes into the training modules and into the on-water operation has just been the best that I've ever seen it. At this point, we're going to talk waterway markers, and this is a big piece of what we do. And again, this kind of falls into Brian's camp, or it falls into Brian's camp. So I'm going to let him talk about it. Are you ready, Brian?
Yes, thank you, Randy. So another program that I coordinate is Waterway Markers. And this includes buoys and signs, whether they're regulatory or informational, private waterway markers. So we have an application review process and permit issuing. I also work with the 32 different programs for buoy and sign order coordination. We also do provide buoys and signs for other agencies on special projects, especially catered towards compliance and safety. And then just briefly touch on our inventory. And so regulatory markers may only be placed in locations consistent with state law, and they're a control or restriction imposed upon operation of a vessel or where vessels may not enter. So, for example, slow no wake, no boats, swim area, 10-mile-per-hour restriction. And then informational markers indicate a danger from either a natural or man-made hazard and convey information of an official nature which contribute to the health, safety, and well-being of the boaters using the state's waters. So such as rocks, low water, marine entrance, or hazard ahead. So the Marine Board provides buoys and signs for local and special waterway rules when requested by our agency programs or other agencies as well. And then the one piece that a lot of people don't know about is the regulatory informational waterway markers that are installed on privately owned moorages and docks must have a waterway marker permit. And that is a rule that specifically states if they were installed or replaced after July 1st, 2015. So in addition to our waterway marker permit that we issued, generally there's other regulatory agencies such as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Coast Guard, and Oregon Department of State Lands that also require some type of authorization or permit depending on where the waterway marker, specifically a buoy, is installed. So the application is a review mechanism to ensure that these privately owned signs and buoys are installed to standard specifications and also within rule. And depending on the location, like I said, there are other permits or authorizations for buoys. And really the most common private waterway marker that is out of compliance is generally a slow no wake buoy that is placed where there is no restriction. So whether it's a homemade slow no wake buoy, as you see there, somebody took a green can Coast Guard buoy and then painted it white, put a buoy, slow no wake buoy label on it. They also put a LED lights on it. That was in an area that there was no restriction for slow no wake. Also in the picture above, you'll see that somebody put out a string of floats off their dock to try and prevent folks from going through that area close to their dock, not an area that had a slow no wake restriction. The other piece outside buoys is signs. So I have the privilege to work with some talented individuals on creating signs to educate boaters, whether it be regulatory or informational. These are all signs that we develop in-house and then send out for production. These signs are more specific to the facility, and oftentimes the work I do just does meander over into our facility section. So like Pine Hollow Reservoir, I worked with stakeholders there to design a sign that educated boaters there due to the special rules. And then the additional sign there to the right is a specific special rule for that area. And then currently there is no inventory system for buoys or signs that provides the location, the need, whether they're off station, they need replaced or repaired. And then one of the things that I would like to complete by the end of this year is having that tool to be able to know where buoys are at that we've installed or we provided to agencies and know the condition, so we can actually have a true inventory on what's out there. My goal is to have that done by the end of the year and provide a dashboard that gives us a statewide approach for knowing where these buoys are at or need to be serviced. And I will ask if there's any questions regarding waterway markers.
Have you been deploying those right now for some of the areas that need new ones?
So I have been fulfilling requests from our different programs for buoys. For new buoys and replacement, I will say that we work really hard to restore buoys because a buoy label is about $29 compared to a new buoy is average with shipping about $200. And so we work really hard with our programs to restore the buoys just to be cost effective. One program I can think of in particular, I just ordered 70 buoy wraps for Klamath County. So we work really hard. Instead of buying 70 new buoys, every 5 years we restore them. So to answer that question, we have been very busy fulfilling orders and getting those buoys out there, whether it be water levels permitting, lakes unfreezing, those things. Does that answer your question, Chair Early?
Yes, it did. Thank you. And thank you for your fiscal oversight and consciousness.
Hey, Brian. This member with you.
Yes, Member Withy.
Have you got buoys set for the lower Willamette and a plan of where you're going to place them?
So specifically the lower Willamette, there has been no buoys planned for that as of now. That is a very challenging section of the river to place buoys and the permitting process that we have to go through. So in regards to the lower Willamette, we have no buoys at this time that are going to be installed. We have been working very hard on the signage efforts with the facility owners. And right now that is our biggest tool on the ground.
So do you feel that the new rules can be put in place with just signage and buoys?
I'm going to defer that question to Randy.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll follow that up. So we've, the way the rules were adopted, it's very different than the Newburgh Pool where we had specific zones. In this case, we've got larger swath of river with a larger number of access points. So we are putting a lot of our eggs in the signage basket. Janine has worked extremely hard with the facility providers to both get signs, working with Brian to get the signs developed, but also get cooperative efforts to locate them where they will be visible. We've also developed a number of outreach tools that will be distributed by volunteers, by interest groups, and by law enforcement, including what we call a RAC card, an informational sheet that covers that. We've got the information on the website updated. The interactive map has been extended downriver. We'll be doing all the social media work. There are a couple places where buoys are easy to do with the new regulations, the slow no wake zone behind Ross Island. So that will be addressed. Longer term, because everything in Portland costs more. We do want to do some stenciling on the bridge abutments for the pass-through zone, and that is a significant process. And it's going to be very expensive. So those funds have been set aside, and we're actively working on a contract process to hire somebody to do that stenciling. As far as putting buoys out, we're trying to avoid that because buoys in that lower river are just tough. They come off station as currents change and move. We had a lot of experience back in 2009 and 10 with the initial regulations, Holgate Channel, Ross Island regulations, where we did some large pontoon signs. You know, $5,000 to build the structure, the pontoon float, and then about $5,000 a year just to maintain that, keep it upright, pull it out from under floating homes when they broke away and drifted down. It was challenging to say the least. So we're utilizing all other tools at our disposal and trying to avoid the huge floating signs. So I hope that alleviates some concerns, but we're working hard to make sure the public knows what's going on.
Thanks, Randy.
Sure.
So,
All right. So yes.
Member Jackson has a question. I'm not sure if it's for Randy or Brian. Kind of along those same lines as we were talking about the obstructions, but also things like permitted buoys. So I know, like picking on Portland, the 3 houseboat communities that are in the pass-through zone, they have permitted slow no wake buoys that they put out seasonally. But there's also a lot of what I would call bootleg markers that are out in either in those areas or in other areas that are basically like wooden boxes painted up to look like a marker. Is there a way to report those? And then likewise, where you know that there should be a permanent marker, for example, there was a slow no wake marker in the Holgate Channel that was just one of the white markers. It appears to be gone. It appears to have been possibly taken by one of the camps. Is there a way to report missing, believed to be legit markers?
Yes. Board member Laura, just report those to either Brian and I, and we'll work it through the system. We'll work with Multnomah County or Clackamas County. If we were to get a photo and a location of an illegal buoy, that's kind of a tough thing. It's really up to local law enforcement to take action on those buoys since they're out on the water. And many times they will pick those up, drop them on a nearby dock, or remove them completely. They don't like to unless we specifically asked them to, just because there's private, concerns about it being a piece of private property and that sort of thing. But I would agree with you that we would like to see those laundry soap jugs and things like that go away in favor of legitimate markers. The other thing that we're concerned about in that section is a huge proliferation of permitted markers. With the heavy amounts of development there, you could literally end up with an obstacle course of buoys all the way down the river, and we're trying to avoid that situation too. So thank you for the note on the Holgate Channel. I will work with Multnomah County on that. One thing as an aside, I don't know if I mentioned it later, but I have set aside some funds. If I can find a contractor who is dependable and reasonably priced, I would like to turn over the buoy management to a private entity. It's very difficult for Multnomah County to handle those buoys in large water. It's technical, it takes a lot of equipment, it's very hard on your equipment, it's hard on your body, there's safety issues. And I think we could do a better job if we assign that to a private individual and just paid the money to have buoys managed more proactively through the Lower Willamette, Holgate Channel, Multnomah Channel, Portland Harbor, and those sorts of places. So that is something I have actively set aside money for, and we're actively, again, working on a contract to help us do that. So that'll help us be more responsive as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. So jumping on to the U.S. Coast Guard District 13. So this gets specifically at Board Member Withey's question earlier, what's our relationship with the U.S. Coast Guard? Our relationship with the U.S. Coast Guard is actually pretty good to very good. Much better than it was 10 years ago in my tenure in this position. Part of that is we have an MOU. We've had an MOU for decades with District 13. And what this MOU is, it basically defines what we do with recreational boating and what the Coast Guard does and doesn't do with recreational boating. It sets up things like it establishes a communications protocol between the Coast Guard and the Marine Board. And I've fallen back on this on a number of times. When you have like Station Yaquina Bay or these other local locations, they're rotating staff through there on a every other year, and they don't keep track of all the local relationships. Sometimes they don't even understand that they can share information with us. And I have literally been told that they cannot release basic boating incident information to me, and I have to pull out the MOU and call District 13 and sit down with them and say, actually, you can and you will, because it's just part of the partnership. We have to do this. And we've taken more time to do that in recent years, and District 13 up in Seattle has been very helpful in improving those relationships. The MOU also clarifies enforcement authority and cooperation. So if it's a state numbered boat, Oregon officers, contractors typically handle those incidents. If it's a federally documented vessel, the Coast Guard will take the lead. However, whoever is first on scene agrees to begin an investigation and take care of life and safety issues, and then we share information later. It finds how complaints are handled, who they go to. If it's a BUII, for example, U.S. Coast Guard can begin an investigation, but will hand it off to the state authority as soon as possible. Jointly recognizes, it also requires us to jointly recognize the auxiliary boat inspection decals and the marine vessel safety checks as equivalent. So whether it's the decal on the back of your boat that the Marine Board gives out or the decal that the auxiliary gives out, we look at those, we try to look at those as the same thing. We try to cooperate on that. Public education training cooperation is also outlined, and I think Marianne has just done a wonderful job there with working with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, integrating their priorities into our programs and getting their instructors and volunteers to help us deliver Boat Oregon. And then it, of course, defines accident reporting, and it's in the accident reporting piece that it specifically, jumping on to the next slide here, outlines the boat accident investigation team. So this is a team, we had a boat accident reconstruction team for years, but it was fairly inactive. So 4 or 5 years ago, we stood up a new boating accident investigation team referencing the MOU, and we conduct annual training and sort of drills or actual on-water effort to get them out there to investigate. I think the most recent significant place the boat accident investigation team was deployed was the double carbon monoxide fatality up in Umatilla, where they were able to go in with testing equipment, actually take the boat for a test drive, measure CO levels in various locations across the boat, and then provide that evidence to Umatilla County Marine Patrol officers and their medical examiner to help determine what led to that incident. So the boat accident investigation team is a great resource and very dedicated group of people, and that will continue to evolve over time. Okay. Spent a little bit of time here on Outfitter Guide and the law enforcement effort there. Outfitter Guide, just so you know a little bit about the program. Nothing new to Val, of course. 1,300 registered guides as of a week or two, or for 2020, down about 6% from 2019. We've been staying under that 1,500 mark for the past 6 or 8 years. So it just seems to be pretty stable right there. 2021 registrations are currently at about 111% of 2020, so people are getting kind of back into the game after last year's strange year. You can see the numbers. Fishing is the #1 activity that guides participate in the state, but we also have some rock climbing, bicycling, and others. 88% of them are Oregon residents, 5% are Washington, 4% are Idaho. And again, that comes back to that border water. OSP is a really important partner in this. As we were reconfiguring the Outfitter Guide program and working closely with guides to try to I guess, weed out some of the bad apples, so to speak, out there, we realized we did some pilot projects and figured out that a close relationship with OSP was the only way to get at some of the enforcement issues. So we have an annual contract now with OSP. We've had some new laws in recent years that have helped us close some of the loopholes we had in the past. We do a biennial $323,000 contract with OSP Special Investigations Unit, which covers all aspects of outfitting and guiding activity. And they've, because of those funds, they've broken some really good cases here in the last couple of years. So that's pretty gratifying. And
yeah, that's been an absolutely wonderful partnership. I mean, from the guide community, I'd just like to say that, you know, everybody has been impressed with the increased level of law enforcement when it comes to illegal guiding, and also problems with the charters and outfitters. I mean, the charters also. So thanks, Randy.
Oh, well, thank you, Chair. I really appreciate that. I'll make sure that Cindy hears that as well. It helps when you have good staff like Cindy Bolduc. She really keeps tabs on the program, works well with the Guide Advisory Committee. And one thing that's not in here is the recent Guide Advisory Committee meeting. We placed new members on the panel, rotated a few folks off, filled some vacancies, and we have by far the most diverse Guide Advisory Committee we've ever had, including bicycle guides and folks who do sort of the less traditional activities. So that's kind of going to usher in a new era for the Outfitter Guide program. Related to enforcement actions in the last year, 5 denials, 2 suspensions, 8 conditional or probationary status, and these relate to firearms restrictions, failure to disclose violations, and revocation of ODFW licenses, top of the list. So we're looking at lots of good information to help us run the program. ODFW, OSP, counties have been great partners, and we continue to get reports from the public as well, which we always follow up with a standardized process now. Any questions on that? Okay, powering along here. So I want to talk some about the business model that we use, because this is, obviously what I spend a lot of my time doing as the program manager. So contracts, contract development. So over the course of a year, we go through a process starting in about January, where we let the We let the counties know how much money they're going to be allocated in the coming year. They write action plans. They send information to us. Once the contracts are in place, they will submit quarterly reimbursement requests. So this is a reimbursement program. We'll spend some time on here in a second. And they spend time in the field or doing the program management, and then we send them money to cover the cost of that. I'll talk some about the contract oversight and the newer biennial contract process we're implementing right now. Okay. Allocation letters. We send out the allocation notifications in January. This is the one where we use an allocation format, which I'll explain in a little bit because it's dizzying, to say the least. We let them know how much money they've got, and then they sit down in February, March, and put together what kind of plan they can deliver in the coming year. They send it back to us for review. We look at it, just trying to make sure that it's in line with what we think should be going on in that county, and then we approve it, and we get a signed contract that's between us. Both Ginger Davis and I spearhead that effort. Things that were a little bit different this year is we needed to get an Attorney General review on the contract just to make sure it was up to snuff, that the legal language was adequate, and make sure that any of the amendment process is okay. Okay. Reimbursements. All right. So when we get the reimbursement request in, it must include a general ledger expenditure report for the quarter. It'll include a quarterly report from the law enforcement database. I think I talked some about the database here in a little bit, and it includes the authorized signature, which may be a county commissioner, maybe a sheriff, or a designated program manager, supervisor. OSP provides a detailed report of marine activities each month with their invoice. So it's a little bit different how we handle OSP and the counties, because OSP is a state agency. We can have a different relationship with them because the counties are not a state agency. It's different. Oops, I just zoomed way past things. Okay, reimbursements again. One thing that I look at when I'm doing the reimbursement review is a comparison of the patrol and expenditures. We will both Ginger and I will review to make sure that we're seeing a reasonable amount of on-water patrol and that the expenditures match the types of things we're either statutorily able to reimburse, or that it's meeting their program requirements, their action plan that they turned in at the beginning of the year. We do reviews for additional errors. There is a fair number of math errors that occur. Occasionally, there are reimbursement requests for things that we would not reimburse for, like uniforms. We don't pay for uniforms. That's something that the local agency needs to provide. One place we get hung up occasionally, and we have to work with them, is patrol assist, like highway patrol assist. We have seen instances where a county is short-staffed and that Marine officer gets pulled into highway patrols or fighting forest fires, and we actively review those. A few hours here and there, we understand, as you're headed to the boat ramp to do marine enforcement, you may come into a car wreck situation and need to spend an hour or two there, but if you're spending 3 or 4 solid days on highway patrol, that's not something recreational boaters should be paying for. So we will specifically deny those funds requests. Reversion is kind of a hot topic sometimes and a little bit misunderstood. You can imagine as we give a program, say $100,000, they forecast into the coming year how much operations are going to cost, how much fuel is going to cost, how much people are going to cost, all those activities. They put it out there. They work through the year and they try to hit that mark. Depending on how a program designs itself, if they provide a lot of match, they will just build the program they want, and then we pay for the piece we can and they cover the rest. So all that money gets spent. Other programs have become increasingly reliant on Marine Board dollars. So when you get to June 30th, they may have forecast how they were going to spend that $100,000, but the deputy maybe had family leave, maybe got injured, maybe left for another job, fuel may have gotten cheaper, and they may revert some of those funds. In some cases, the reversion can be pretty significant, like 15, 20, 30% of their allocation. Those funds remain obligated funds until we get to the end of the period, and then they are reverted, which basically means we will not be reimbursing those to a program. They stay with the Oregon State Marine Board. If it's an even year, part of the biennium, we have refocused some of those funds for special equipment purchases or special projects. If it's on an odd numbered year when the biennium ends, those go back to ending balance and are available for the greater agency. So these funds, some people feel like reversion is wasted. There's been suggestions that we penalize programs that have large reversions. When you look at reversions over time, they're very inconsistent. You can have one county that's very good at spending all of its money year after year after year, and then they have a tough year and they revert $50,000. So we haven't gone down the road of penalizing or permanently removing funds from programs that can't spend it. The philosophy has been that would be penalizing recreational voters, not the agency. Okay, this is where you, yes, go ahead.
So when you're speaking of a contract program, you're speaking of contracts that you're making with the sheriff organizations versus
Yes.
contracts for buoys and other services.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Withy, for that clarification. That's one of those jargon things that I've gotten lost in too. When we talk about a program, we're typically talking about a county law enforcement program.
In these contracts, are you stipulating the requirement placed upon them to maintain the equipment that they are provided by the Marine Board to certain standards?
Yes, Board Member Withy. There are requirements. That's another thing Brian oversees, is making sure they do the maintenance. That is challenging because not everybody, how many highway officers would do all the mechanical work on their patrol vehicle? Probably not very many, and you probably wouldn't want them to. Yet we do hope and in some cases expect Marine officers to do basic maintenance on their boats, on the jet pumps, on the controls, some of that stuff. Some of them are good at it, some of them aren't. Some of them know what basic maintenance is, some of them don't. Some of them know preventative maintenance, some of them don't. So Brian really has to bird dog the individual programs, make sure that the maintenance, the regular maintenance and the repairs are being done. He keeps a short leash on that, but it is in the contract. And there are also language in the contract. If, say somebody takes, and this has happened in the not too distant past, a sheriff may determine that they need to use the boat for a non-Marine Board function, maybe to look for a fleeing criminal who was last seen in a waterway, and then that boat sustains damage. We're not going to pay for that damage. That's up to the county. And that's been a bit of a wake-up call for some of the programs. If they're involved in an accident, the contract stipulates that they will pay for the repairs of the boat.
Yeah, that indeed happened. Did it not? That was in Walla Walla County.
Yeah, not naming names, but it does happen from time to time. Okay, the screen before you, and this is a high-level thing. I would suggest if you want to dive into this, let's set aside a day and I'll walk you through the allocation formula. So this is going to be a high-level thing. This was developed back in 2010. Prior to 2010, funds were allocated to counties based on registered number of boats per county way back in 1970. Klamath County had the most registered boats back then. Over time, that allocation was modified based on both objective and subjective needs by the county. When we got to about 2010, under the former director, we looked at that and said, man, this is not really based in reality. As we analyzed numbers, we saw that we were very valley-centric for our funding model. So I participated, helped develop a more objective funding model that looks at actual measurements of what's going out there on the waterway. And the goal was to basically create a model that would pay for the burden created by recreational boating. So that's kind of a negative way to say it, but if you got lots of use days on your local county, you should get more money. If your county costs a lot of money to live and operate in, officers are going to be more expensive, so you get a small differential for that. If your waterway is really complex, lots of whitewater, lots of big stones, lots of tidal exchange, you know, big tides, that sort of thing, you get a differential for that. So we're trying to match the complexity, all of the contributing factors, and base funding on that. That model was developed with pretty heavy oversight from the Law Enforcement Advisory Group. So we had program managers and deputies on that that pushed for this, that wanted unique issues addressed. So that was a big challenge. We pulled together a lot of data, worked with the Triennial Survey, grabbed data from the state parks survey on recreational use in the state. We estimate non-resident use based on the number of contacts that were recorded in the database. We looked at quite a bit of information to try to come up with this model. And it's what we've got. We revised it in 2015 when we got the fee increase because there was going to be significant new funds coming in. We decided rather than adjust the model so that some programs would lose money and others would gain money, that we would apply the new funds only to build up programs and not cut other programs. Because a lot of programs back in 2010 with the new formula, a lot of programs saw significant cuts for the next 5 years. In 2019, we met again to review the formula as we were headed towards a fee increase. The way the fee increase shook out is there really weren't significant additional funds going to the counties. So we opted to basically leave it at it was, and if additional funds came to be, we would regroup and figure out how to disperse those. Okay, whoops, I had all kinds of fun slides here and I missed them. Okay, this is interesting because if you haven't been with the Marine Board long, it's easy to get focused in on just what's happened the last couple of years. But there is a 10-year history of funding that's actually it's a 30-year history of funding, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly. So, you know, in 2011, the agency was under new leadership. We had new accounting systems going into place. We were dusting off old processes and replacing them with new processes. And we were faced with some pretty significant statewide budgetary issues and declining registration at the Marine Board. So you can see here where these are the funds we were making available to law enforcement. The blue line is what we were what we approved to allocate to county law enforcement and Oregon State Police. I'll explain the I think that's a red line, red or yellow line, I'm colorblind, in a minute. So I just wanted to put a little bit of context here. In 2011, we did the new allocation formula. Unfortunately, that rolled out at a time when we were cutting budgets, so some programs got cut more than others based on the new funding. In 2012, we had to implement budget cuts. In 2015, we got the fee increase. So you can see here where we started, we were able, it was significant enough that we were able to do allocation increases that brought us up to this level. The yellow line here, this bright line, red line, represents what if we did a straight cost of living or what's the term here, adjusted for inflation level. This is what it would have looked like. And you will hear this if you talk to law enforcement officers, to program managers, they'll say, man, the allocations haven't kept up with inflation. This is kind of what they're talking about. So when you hit 2021, you're seeing $1 million gap there based on what they would like to see. Even though we've had significant increases, there's some interpretation here, and I just want to put that out there. It is what it is. it's part of what we deal with. I have had conversations, 3 or 4 conversations already this year with program managers who said it's going to be tough to deliver a program this year. We'll do the best we can, but next year we're going to have to cut staff. So that is the reality. We've done some significant fee increases, and I am not in any way advocating any particular action to address this. It is just the reality, and you will hear about this. Let's see if I've got something else here I need to say. Okay, the one dip here, I do want to explain that. So the dip here was in 2000. Remember, we did the fee increase in 2019, but it didn't actually get implemented until January of that year because it was a calendar year. As the programs operate on a fiscal year, that meant there was 6 months with no benefit of the fee increase. So that was the drop. And then the next year we replaced those funds. And basically the fee increase made it whole. Another reason that we kind of dropped back here is, if you recall, with the 2015 fee increase, is we didn't get everything that we'd asked for with that. The per foot price was reduced by the legislature, so it didn't carry through for that full time, and the available funds weren't quite there. I will give law enforcement a lot of credit. We've had some programs who've been able to tighten belts, to switch the formats of their program, and to operate on less funds. And now we're going to look at, here's another funding history one I'll go through, and then I want to look at at actual metrics on the ground with what the programs are delivering. I'll pause for a second for questions here. Are there any? Okay. Funding history, just a little bit of a closer look. I wanted to pull out a few programs going back to 2010, so 2011. In 2011, for example, Malheur County was getting $105,000. Then we implemented the new allocation formula, and they dropped, along with the cut, they dropped to $91,000. That was a little bit painful. Some of the programs took significant cuts. Polk County took some cuts there. So this is just 1 year later. We minimized the cuts to no more than 5% per year, I believe, based on what the calculation came out with. Although that looks like more than 5%. But anyway, there were general cuts across the board here. You can see what that is. And then this last year, these are where we're at now. So Malheur, 105,000 10 years ago. Now they're getting 122. If you look at cost of living inflation increases, that would be more like 144 or 150. So I just wanted to put that out there as a perspective. Everybody, for the most part, is getting more than they did. Some programs drop so much that they haven't caught up to where they were. Some very small programs continue to see regular increases. Okay. Other special payment considerations. So this looks at the 2021. So this is, we're recognizing that the paradigm continues to shift in law enforcement. There are some things that we're trying to do a little bit differently. We put a lot of eggs in the law enforcement basket historically, asking counties to do a lot of education in the schools. And it's a very hit and miss now. Schools are tough for law enforcement officers to get into, to do that annual training. That's been the case for a long time. So this reflects some of those changes. So here you can see that this coming biennium, we're going to allocate, or we have allocated $10,956,000 to the county payments specifically. So we determine basically what percentage each county gets of that total fund, and that's their allocation amount. We have allocated $650,000 for boat construction during that time period. That seems like a lot. 10 years ago, we allocated, I think, $350,000 to $400,000 a year. Boats cost more, aluminum's gone up. We don't want the fleet to become unreliable, so we have invested in that. One of the new expenditures is $90,000 for boating safety advocates over the biennium. That seems like a lot. The goal here is to do 3 contracts for $10,000 each this year, beginning this season. I've talked about the boating safety advocate concept in the past, but basically to put a civilian boating safety advocate in the local community and help them try to address this on the ground boating safety concerns with the more casual, less experienced users. So to be in the right place at the right time, talk to school groups, community organizations, paddling clubs, and so forth, and really stress and advocate for life jacket use, help train on cold water immersion, that kind of stuff. That would be 30,000 this year, 60,000 next year. I am finding, and I was on a phone call yesterday, that finding new hires is actually quite difficult right now in certain areas, and I'm experiencing some of that. I've got one candidate in place, one likely candidate, and another position I'm going to have to keep working on for this spring. The special emphasis funding is a concept that we hold money aside to deal with sort of in-season emergencies or special projects. That's been a really useful fund. If we see a fishing regulatory change in a county and we need to do some additional boating emphasis there, I can put together a group and send them in and spend a few $1,000s doing a project. We've used special emphasis funds for Make Way campaigns on the Columbia River. We've used special emphasis funds for BUII saturation patrols. In some cases, I've allocated money to individual programs, counties, to enhance patrols on. I've used it on the Maloma Channel several times, Newburgh Pool, where else? Up near McNary Dam on the Columbia River. With mixed success. I've seen programs who spend that money ferociously and then revert $10,000 of their regular money. I'm not sure I understand that completely. But it has given us flexibility to address some particular problems and is a tool that I really appreciate having at my disposal. So that's per biennium, $30,000 a year. What doesn't get spent, we'll get close to the end of the biennium and we'll look for shortfalls in other programs or maybe equipment needs like new radio purchases for marine law enforcement, and we'll utilize those funds. So that's what that looks like. That's a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Is there any questions on that? Okay. Contract management. Try to move through these a little more quickly here. Contract management. So basically, this is how we review those contracts on a quarterly basis. We have a large we have a pretty robust, a little bit antiquated database system. It's been in place since 2009, I believe. Where we track law enforcement officers enter their daily activities. Boater contacts, hours spent on the water, hours spent on the shore, program stuff like training and everything else. So we track all that here and we use that to help manage the contracts. I look at this and say I have a county that shows 0 patrol hours at all, and yet they're requesting a lot of money reimbursement. I'll go back to that program and say, okay, you need to explain this to me. And it helps keep them honest, it helps keep us engaged, and it's just a good tool to track those. What happens if I click forward here? I can't remember. Okay. I'm going to go back one. Nope. One more. Okay. We have the reimbursement request, which is back here. And that's just their quarterly ask, and that requires us, that was set up very specifically by a former director to make sure we are on a quarterly basis evaluating the program's performance. So they send us a request for money, we dig into these and other documents and the ledgers that they send us and ensure that everything is being spent as appropriate. And then we have the full contract that we'll go back and compare things to as well. That's more of an education for them. A lot of program managers sign the contract and don't read it. So when they try to bill us for an accident, we can say, nope, right here you signed that you would be responsible for your own accident repairs. And we hold them accountable to that.
Hey, Randy.
Yes.
This is Member Whitney. Often we hear comments about not having enough law enforcement presence. You're actually tracking the number of hours that they're spending on the water, so you can go back and verify whether they're being utilized properly in the different water bodies?
Yes, we do that. And I think I have an example here that I'll share that might help illustrate that. The difficult thing for me as the program manager, and maybe in the future somebody else can solve this, is this is a reimbursement program. There is so much complexity within the individual county in so many ways that it's not a one-to-one relationship. If we give you an additional, amount of money, are we going to get that many more hours on the water? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of factors that go into that, and that's the challenge. It would be, there may be other funding models out there that the board may want to consider in the future that are much more specifically allocated. But that is a big ask and would involve certainly a lot of input from the Oregon State Sheriff's Association and other entities as you work through that concept. So monitoring performance, we review the action plan, the contract, we look at the reimbursements and review. We do program audits, actually, about 6 per year. This is something we started 6 or 7 years ago, where we go sit down at the programs with the program manager, the county sheriff sometimes sits in on those, their accountant or their grant manager, and we actually look at timesheets. We actually look at the citations, the paper copies to make sure they match up with the electronic reporting. We do a whole program review, and then we come out with findings. I would call it more of a friendly audit than a painful one. Our goal is to make the program better. And through this process, it's been extremely useful. We found incidents where we were being overcharged for vehicle leases, or they were incorrectly tracking certain types of hours and stuff. So that has been an ongoing process. Curtailed somewhat with COVID because we haven't been doing the in-office visits, but we'll be getting that back on track here. So that's just one of the tools that we use. This information also goes in, we're entering, the Coast Guard also demands accountability because they provide funds, federal funds to us. So on an annual basis, we have to complete a performance report, several documents, but the one that I work most on is the USG Performance Report Part 2. And that's where we enter all of our enforcement data, the number of boater contacts, number of citations, number of life jacket violations, number of officers. That goes into a big matrix, and then you get a score out the other end that says if you're meeting the basic requirements of the contract. Contacts over time. So again, this is what it is. There's a lot of factors that come into this. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. So contacts over time show a definite strong response. So this is where we can say, okay, we put money into the program. What we're looking at here is 6 or so of the counties. Behind it here is all of the counties statewide. And I charted out the 2010 fiscal year contacts in that dark bluish color, the 2015 fiscal year contacts in the middle, and then I think that's a bright green on the right is the 2020 fiscal year contact. So a contact, I called a contact anytime an officer made contact with the boater that resulted in a documented boating enforcement report, a citation, or a warning. So let's just take a look here. Look at Clackamas. Okay, in 2010, they were at about 3,800 contacts over time. When we get to 2015, they're up here. When we get to 2020, they're getting close to 6,000. So that was despite stagnant funding over the years. This is, in response to Newberg Pool issues and sort of consolidating efforts to be on the water more. And they did make more contacts, and they showed that over time. It's very different. When you look at Columbia County, you get a huge spike in contacts in 2015. Well, what happened in 2015 is we were having a host of issues on Maloma Channel, and we put some special emphasis funding towards Columbia County to hire an officer to specifically sit on Maloma Channel and manage some of the issues that we saw there. That was about the time we had a pretty terrible accident between a fishing guy and a recreational boat that was indicative of the type of crowding and mixed use we were seeing there. So you see this big spike. That's all because one person was hired for one season and put on the water. So you can see how much variability you get within individual. Josephine County is a different story. They were faced with pretty significant funding reductions through the federal, what do you call it, Community Self-Determination Act, you know, basically the federal forest funds losses. And they lost, their numbers would have been up here in the mid 2000s. They declined over time because of staffing shortfalls. They just could not get people. They had so little money. Their law enforcement, their Marine officer was doing a lot of other duties. It looks extremely bad this year, but they had a brand new officer hired on, going through training, and there weren't a ton of contacts, but we're seeing a really good rebound now. We worked really hard with that program. We've had multiple meetings with the sheriffs and the program coordinators over the last few years, and you're going to see good things coming from them. Lane County, you see a stair step up. Malheur, a bit mixed. Multnomah, you see a big decline here. Some of that comes with their own budget reductions, a program that provides a lot of matching dollars. It's the same place that Josephine was in. They may have provided a lot of matching dollars in the past. Then they lose that funding source, and now they suddenly rely solely on the Oregon State Marine Board. In the case of Multnomah County, they still provide a pretty significant match, but it was reduced quite a bit through budget issues in the last few years. And you see that reduction in the number of contacts. And unfortunately, that coincides with some of the lower river problems that we see. Washington County is interesting. They basically decide what their program is going to look like, and then they use whatever money we give them to fund the program. And it's been a very consistent program over the years. The 95% of their effort is on Hag Lake. So again, that kind of is what it is. It's interesting to look at. It shows that money can make a difference, but it also shows that staffing and local issues can have a big impact on any given year.
Hey, Randy.
Yes.
This is Craig again. Just to clarify what you're showing us, these are documented contacts.
Yes.
So you're interpreting that as the indication of presence on the water. But
Yes.
if you had good behaving boaters, you wouldn't have documented contacts, right? They wouldn't be. Go ahead.
That certainly plays into it, and you would expect those trends to show up over time. The other thing, so that goes both ways. You get a big influx of, say, uneducated boaters like we saw last year. I think that's part of the boost that we saw in Clackamas County is you had so many non-motorized boaters going out on the water who really had very basic skills and different expectations for what goes on. So that enables more contacts. We saw a lot of non-motorized use, or non-motorized use just expand dramatically in the early 2010s, and we were strongly encouraging law enforcement to make contact and educate folks. So in some counties where, say Josephine County, where you have a lot of non-motorized use, you would get a big increase in contacts. And in a county like Clatsop, where you have very extremely small amounts of non-motorized use, you wouldn't see any impact. So those use patterns do shift over time, sometimes as much as year to year. And then say last year, you know, we get a big fire year and boating ends on Labor Day, and that can impact the number of contacts too. So there are a lot of variables that go into those number of contacts.
Thanks.
Yes, Laura.
Wasn't some of the Multnomah County also related to non-marine issues where Marine officers were being deployed to terrestrial situations?
Yes, thank you, Board Member Jackson. That's another thing. It's sort of like, it's the same version of a forest fire. I can look back over time and say, you know, there were years when Jackson County did very little activity on the water in the last half of August because the Rogue River was on fire. In this case, it was kind of the riots and civil unrest in Portland, and they were pulled off the water quite a bit. Whereas other counties were separated from that enough that it was actually kind of an opportunity for them to just go out on the water and do their thing. And I think you saw that with Lane County. That's a long way of saying that this is a challenging set of contracts to manage because every county is different. There are so many variabilities coming in, and we just do our best to keep them going in the right direction. We work really hard at that. Any additional questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it over here. I think this is your last big splash here, and this is going to go to Brian because law enforcement platforms are a big discussion item. They're really important. It's really important that we get it right and we give these guys a safe boat. When we say platform, we mean boat, and that's part of the jargon that goes with it. And after you use it for a while, it makes sense. These guys are on it all day long. They need a boat that's dependable, that fits the waterways. And it needs to last, we want these boats to last 15, 20, 25 years, so there's a lot of care and feeding that goes into it. And that's why I'm going to turn it over to Brian because he is the expert there.
Thank you, Randy. Chair Early, I was going to recommend or offer a break to the board if they would like. This probably will take me about 15 minutes or so to discuss the law enforcement platforms, but it is getting a little bit later in the morning if the board would want to take a quick break before I dive into this.
Thank you, Brian. How's everybody feeling? Would you like a short break? I don't hear anybody. Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
I said I'm good.
I'd like to finish this whole discussion and then take the break.
All right.
Okay. If we're only about 15 minutes, let's go ahead and power on through there, Brian, and then we'll have a break after the presentation.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for the offer.
Absolutely. So another program that I coordinate is our law enforcement fleet. There's a lot of different areas of that. That's the maintenance. I'll discuss our fleet service plans, the repairs, that's coordination and approval, the reporting aspect of it, equipment, procurement inspections, education, training and familiarization. And then I am going to talk about our Critique the Fleet project that we completed earlier this year. So looking at our law enforcement platforms, our fleet that I get the opportunity to manage. So we have currently 151 platforms. So that's 58 inboard jet boats. We have 3 outboard jets, 22 outboard prop, 25 personal watercraft, 40 non-motorized, which consist of drift boats, catarafts, rafts, kayaks, and then we have 3 special operations, which includes an airboat and then 2 more surface drive, like duck style boats. And on the right here is kind of an example straight out of our database. So I have an inventory system, so I can pull up every single boat based on the agency. I can look at all of the important information right there at my disposal. I can look at the title, the maintenance schedule, all the information about the boat. So that's part of our inventory system on the database. So maintenance, it is the responsibility of each sheriff office to complete the required intervals of maintenance, and that's per the intergovernment agreement. The fleet service plans, we provide each agency a specific plan, and this plan includes all of the Marine Board funded platforms that their program has, and the repairs are completed through a very specific approval process. So to the right, it shows this specific vessel, 2016, shows the propulsion, it shows which maintenance item, the service, whether it's change, inspect, replace, and then the service interval. We provide hands-on maintenance training to our law enforcement partners, whether it be at academy or jet boat operations training. We also provide in the field assistance for jet pump repairs, electronics familiarization, and other operational training, whether it being used in sonar, side scan, things of that nature. For example, next week, I'll be out helping a program tear down the jet pump and do some minor repairs on it. One thing that is really important, and one thing about the law enforcement fleet, it really goes hand in hand with our law enforcement training coordinator. There's a lot of aspects of our communication with the different programs where we are juggling things, and we are definitely as one team when it comes to the law enforcement fleet. The average life cycle of our law enforcement powerboats is about 20 years. So the replacement is based upon several different factors and approved by the Law Enforcement Advisory Group. We complete detailed inspections of patrol platforms, and these are done to evaluate the overall condition, the use, the maintenance, the repairs, and then also replacement planning. So one piece to this presentation, and Member Withey requested that I speak about and present about it, is we had our critique the fleet that we looked at earlier this year. And the reason we wanted to critique the fleet was boat procurement has evolved. It requires more time, logistics, details, and quite honestly, cost. The platform design, we know what works. We know what our bread and butter boats are, what works in the field for making contacts. We know what works well for maintenance, where our biggest repair costs are associated, whether it's with labor, the operator feedback, and then also, more importantly, training. And one thing that's really important to drive home is we were looking at critiquing the fleet also from safety and operations, standard lighting, electronics, communications, redundancies, ergonomics and functionality. Seating has evolved over the years, the engine noise, the visibility, and then, the ease of making contacts with boaters. So to critique the fleet, we reviewed 8 years of boat build data, and we took this data to formulate what I call our standard platforms. And these standard platforms are really based on length, propulsion, and configuration. And we also wanted to have a consistent funding model, because oftentimes with our programs going into a boat build, there can be some concerns about funding. So the contribution that the Marine Board makes for the funding of the equipment purchase versus the Sheriff Office. And then also have a streamlined procurement process. By having 3 different programs, sometimes it's really hard to allocate a certain amount of time on all 3 of these programs when they really could be broken down into 3 different positions. So making things efficient for me and time savings is huge. So this is really a breakdown, quick overview of our current process. As you can see, there's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different procedures and a lot of different going backwards that can happen when working with our different programs. And really, I just want to go over the future process. We have a vessel that's chosen for replacement. We have the Law Enforcement Advisory Group that approves the replacement of that. And then the Sheriff Office would choose one of the 3 standard platforms. Now, we still have that option that they could choose a specialty platform. However, the funding model is a little bit different. We have that 100% funding for one of the 3 standard platforms, that 50% funding up to a certain amount on a large specialty platform, which I'll go over a little bit later, and then also the 100% up to $50,000 on that small specialty platform. Then the LEAG approves. The Sheriff Office chooses a vendor based on their individual agency's procurement standards. We have our standard specifications that are required to be met. That goes back to creating these 3 standard platforms. One thing that I often do is coordinate the liquidation of the current boats, which that funding is used to go into the new purchase. And then we have our pre-build meeting with the vendor, the mid-build inspections that I complete, and then the final inspection, delivery, and finish. That would be a much more fluid process than currently how it has been completed. So looking at an 8-year review of the boats we built 39 boats in the last 8 years. The average length is 22 feet. Minimum's 18, the largest is 28. We looked at the configuration, we looked at the contribution by the Marine Board towards the funding of that vessel. I basically took all these different factors that go into building a boat and looked at what we've been doing and broke it down into creating these 3 standard platforms. So 90% of our patrol boats are between 20 and 24 length, and 83% of them are inboard jets, 83% of the 20 to 22 foot length is inboard jets. So we basically came up with these 3 standard platforms, a 20-foot patrol boat, a 22-foot, and a 24-foot. Looked at what we've been using for propulsion, knew what's been working, and then put that together in those platforms for the configuration. And it really was quite easy to narrow it down based on length and configuration. And then going to the funding model that the Law Enforcement Advisory Group discussed and reviewed, and really was consistent with what we've been doing, is that if the agency or the sheriff office chooses one of the standard platforms, the Marine Board through the funding and the liquidation would support 100%. So that allowed us to kind of take that burden off the smaller sheriff offices that are concerned about funding for a new boat. As you can see, if you look at the sheriff office contribution, the average was $7,962 over the course of those 39 builds. The minimum was $0, and then the max was $67,000, which was on a fairly large invoice for a build. So it really was what we've been doing, but putting it more into a formality. And then we do have some programs that specialty platforms are important. So on the small ones, maybe just going to throw out a scenario. We have a program that specifically wants a fiberglass boat. We can get an off-the-shelf product that is less than $50,000. They would be able to have that funded. Or we have a larger program that specifically requests a landing craft. A landing craft costs twice as much as generally what a normal patrol platform is. But we know the value in that for the patrol that they do. And so we would fund that up to 50% or $80,000. So the funding model is consistent, it's fair. It really takes what we've been doing and formalizes it. And so we put together the standard platforms. Now we have the funding model for that, and then took the criteria of what we've been doing in the past and know what works, and put those specifications down in these build sheets. So now we have our standard platforms. The sheriff office can choose based on the type of water they patrol, what's going to be best for their program. We have these standards, and it'll save us a significant amount of time going in the future. Any questions?
So Brian, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I just want to say that it looks like you put a lot of work into it, and it looks like a really great step forward to making your job easier, but also making the agency itself run more efficiently.
Thank you.
And Brian, I just wanted to comment that, you know, you really have done a wonderful job with this program. I know that the LEAG has been very helpful and instrumental in helping to establish some of these new protocols, and they're going to continue to do that.
Correct. Yeah, this is, so we had our meetings earlier this year, and we put together these specifications, and which we had our initial set of draft specifications in February that the LEAG reviewed, went back and made the corrections. And I anticipate there will be a LEAG meeting, I would assume probably in the next month or two. We'll go back and finalize that after the corrections were made, but also talk about procurement and boat builds coming up for the next biennium, because as most people are aware, boat building is taking twice as long as they used to. And so it is something we have to plan a year or two ahead just to get boats built.
Hey, Brian,
And based on your
go ahead.
sorry, based on your funding model that you have here, then how much impact will the increase in pricing that we're seeing basically across the board for any kind of materials impact that?
So currently my biennium equipment budget is right at $500,000, which Randy, it hasn't been approved, but it's been proposed that it goes to $650,000, and that reflects the increase in cost, not only on materials, but changes in supply chain. There are supply things that have gone to the wayside that we can't get anymore, and we've had to change to different vendors, which has cost more money. But the boat prices have gone up significantly. There's definitely no arguing that, and this will allow us to, if you look over the last 2 years, we've built less boats than we had been, and so this will help us kind of get back to the way we were in regards to the boat builds and start. We have some boats that are over 20 years old that need to be replaced, and so this will kind of help us catch up in the next few bienniums.
Thank you. Craig?
Yeah, Brian, great presentation. What is the value of the entire fleet? Do you know?
Member Withy, I do not know the value of the entire fleet. However, I could probably sit down and calculate that within a reasonable amount of time if that's something you'd like me to do.
Well, I think it might be helpful to the board to understand how much investment we have in this program and how much of our budget goes towards this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably about $5 million, I would guess. 100 boats at average $50,000 value. So no small investment at all.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Brian? Brian, do you have anything else?
No, I have no further information to provide. Happy to answer any additional questions.
All right. We will move on. We got 2 slides left here, so I'll make it quick. This one seems a little out of order. Just performance measures over time. As I look at our program, we have some external and internal performance measures we watch. On-water enforcement is a long-term one. I could spend another hour talking about how we look at that. Off-water enforcement, such as boat ramp checks and things, are numbers that we look at over time. That changes with philosophy some, and with the growth of non-motorized boating, it's more effective to contact them off water at the access points than on the water. We look at boater contacts, we look at warnings and citations, fatalities and deaths per 100,000 registered boats. That's something the Coast Guard tracks. And I really hate that number because over half of our annual fatalities are non-registered boats, and yet it counts against us. It counts against that registered boats number, so it makes our proportion look higher than many states, but you know, it is what it is. We look at the cost per patrol hour, so whenever I get a reimbursement as a thumbnail sort of review, I divide the number of hours they spent on the water by the amount of dollars we're sending them, and it's anywhere from $65 to $150 per hour, but that varies from program to program and season to season. We also look at the amount of education that goes into the schools. To start summarizing here. Okay, so I'm going to do full circle here. The boating safety policy. It is the policy of the State Marine Board to promote safety for persons and properties in and connected with the use, operation, and equipment of boats, and to promote uniformity of laws related thereto. Every time I read this, I think this is what I'm all about in this position. This is what the boating safety program is all about. This is our really our guiding light that dictates everything we do, and everything should feed into that. The thing that I like about this is this makes this job especially one that I'm particularly proud to be a part of. I am particularly proud to lead the staff that I lead. So I definitely want to take a second and by name give a shout out to Brian Paulson, who did so much work on these presentations and with the boating platform, waterway marker, all of that stuff. He brings just such a strong work ethic. He thinks outside the box. He's focused on the funds. He's a great person to have lead those programs. Eddie Persichetti is just a breath of fresh air when it comes to the training program. Trying to find that middle ground between working with law enforcement officers and representing the needs of the agency and how we want them to carry the Marine Board's mission out there to our customers who are on the water. Marianne McKenzie has stayed focused on boating education now for a number of years. She works with a large number of volunteers to take that message out to the people, making sure that our programs meet the national standards and working at the national level, which really doesn't get a lot of credit for, but working on multiple national committees, not just representing the state of Oregon, but representing the needs of recreational boaters as these national standards are developed and put in place. I'm so proud of Cindy Bolduc as head of our Outfitter Guide program. She has just brought a steady hand and an eye for detail to that that is really unmatched, and that program is at a place that I'm extremely pleased with. The other folks here are really huge supporters of the program. Ginger Davis helps me with the fiscal work. She does a lot of that nuts and bolts calculator work on the reimbursements and the contracts, churning out a lot of papers for me to sign and to make sure that we're keeping things on track. Jessica Watson has been described as the center of the program because we all use her crazy talents, diverse talents in so many different ways, and her positive attitude has just been great. And then our newest member, Naomi Sherman, in the support role for Outfitter Guide, has been a great addition to our office. You know, it's hard to replace somebody like Sandra Lewis, who'd been here for 45 years, but Naomi's head is in the job and she's doing great things for us. This last year has been challenging in a lot of ways, and yet this group never quit innovating. They never quit trying to figure out ways to be productive, to work with our constituents, and to carry that mission forward of boating safety. Every time there is a boating fatality, we put our heads together and say, man, what could we have done to help prevent this? What future work can we do to help people make a better decision? And that's been really one of the most gratifying aspects of my career of 32 years with Oregon State government. So this is a group that I'm really proud of. I like the work that we do. I really appreciated working with the board over the years and would be glad to answer any questions you may have at this time. Before I finish that, though, I also really need to state my support for Director for Larry for all the work he has done in supporting the agency and the various programs and helping us navigate the last few years of intense political legislative pressure and then COVID too. It's definitely been a team effort top down. So at that point, I'd be glad to answer any questions and then let you guys move on to other business.
Thank you, Randy, for your fabulous presentation, and to everybody in your division. I mean, it's always incredible to hear from, you know, Brian. Eddie has always been great. Marianne and Cindy, Ginger, Jessica. We miss Sandy, but welcome Naomi, and we really are appreciative of this team that you have put together and the presentation that you have presented today. Anybody have any questions for Randy?
I would like to echo those plaudits, Randy. Superior job, and you have an exceptional staff. I really appreciate what you guys do. I think it's key to what the board's able to accomplish. And I would like to encourage other board members to spend a day on the water with law enforcement. I had the opportunity to do that with Clackamas County this last summer, and it was a real eye-opener, and it really helped me understand the issues we're dealing with much better. So I encourage other board members to do it. So thanks for everything you do.
Thank you, board member.
And I would like to echo what Craig said earlier about the Academy. Both Drift and Jet are incredible experiences. If all you can do is get there for one day, I would encourage you to do that, just because it is definitely a community and it's a team effort that puts on all of those training activities. So, and as our job as a board, it's important for us to understand everything that law enforcement does, because they are the cornerstone of our mission of providing safety for Oregon boaters.
Agreed.
Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, then I believe we will take a short break, about 10 minutes. So we will, Jessica, you can go ahead and pause the live feed, and we will return in about 10 minutes. Jennifer, sorry. Jennifer, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. We'll give it about another minute, and then we can go ahead and restart the live feed. Can't watch it on the computer because the talking doesn't line up. Okay, go ahead and start the live feed again. Just let me know when we're good to go.
You can go ahead and start, Beth.
Okay, we are resuming our Oregon State Marine Board meeting of April 14th after our short break. I would like to thank Randy and his entire staff for the incredible law enforcement program that they put together. We are going to move on to item E, which is Veterans Outreach Informational from Josh Mulholland.
Thank you, Chair Early, members of the board. For the record, my name is Josh Mulholland, Environment Policy Program Manager here at the Marine Board. Can I just confirm, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I'll take the thumbs up as a good sign. All right, the first item that we're starting with today is an update on some of the agency's efforts to look for and make available boating opportunities for veterans and also those with disabilities. Since this topic was prioritized by the board last summer, staff has spent considerable time exploring ways that the Marine Board can do more on this very important topic. It became evident early on in these conversations that the most efficient things that we could do as staff was to partner with those agencies that are already well engaged on this front, and namely the biggest one being the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs. And also the Department of Fish and Wildlife is actively pursuing initiatives for these groups as well. So there are efforts ongoing, and we've found some ways to kind of plug into those efforts to maximize the boating opportunities that are made available to these groups. I'd like to note here that ODVA was very happy to be approached by the Marine Board. One of their primary goals is to connect veterans with opportunities around the state, those including recreational opportunities. So they were happy to be approached, and it's something that where our goals and their goals on this topic align really well. Through those initial conversations, we've come up with a three-pronged approach planned for this summer, and then in future years plan to continue to expand our work on this topic. So I talked about those three prongs. The first one is making materials for veterans and those with disabilities from our agency website and from the Department of Fish and Wildlife website available on the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs website. That's the place where many veterans go for their resources, for those opportunities. And so it's a pretty logical but very effective first step to make sure that if they're looking for boating opportunities, that is on our sister agencies' websites as well as our own. So that's again an easy step, but one that I think that will be very beneficial and something that we could do without a whole lot of work. The second approach for this year is to put together a panel of sorts of veterans and persons with disabilities to share their perspectives and challenges in recreating out in the outdoors. And of course, that includes boating. And to provide some suggestions in where not only our agency, but the other natural resource agencies can do a bit better. So that right now is being coalesced, if you will, by the ODVA, Department of Veterans Affairs, and we are in consultation with them on that. And I think that there can be a lot of good that can come from from that panel to really get some of the insights from the people that are affected. And then the third thing we have planned for this year is a media push to connect people to the opportunities that are already out there. We're still exploring ways to actually facilitate events with these other agencies. And the issues with the ongoing pandemic continue to be a challenge in actually facilitating in-person events. But these are the kind of things that ODF&W has already been involved with some free fishing events and events for veterans and also events for those with disabilities. So since fishing and boating go together, like, I don't know, pick a bad analogy, peanut butter and jelly, it seems pretty logical for us to kind of plug ourselves into that more. So we want to make sure that we are connecting to those fishing events and including that boating aspect, both motorized and non-motorized. So to close, on this topic, I'd like to point out that our staff, Ashley Massey and Dorothy Deal, namely, have been working on this really for the past year or so, and we're going to continue to do so. The plan right now would be to come back to the board in October with an update for what we did this year, what went well, what didn't go well, and then things to explore going forward. So I have some additional resources in your board book and some additional details if you're interested in those. I'm not going to rehash all those. But for right now, if the board has any further direction on this topic, anything that we should explore, really anything at all, this is just an informational item. So Chair Early, I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate that. It looks like you have quite the busy summer plan for this. Does anybody have any questions or suggestions for Josh?
Yeah, this is Craig. I applaud you for putting this together, Josh, you and your staff. I would like to see the board, promote this by working with programs on the water. For example, Seattle and many large metropolitan areas in the country have sailing clubs for disabled or veteran people. They have adapted sailboats and have worked with the sailing clubs to have facility owners modify their operations so that they can accommodate such activities. So I don't know if we could work with the sailing club there in Portland or other facility owners to establish such facilities and provide those opportunities. I've looked at the Sailing Association on Chesapeake Bay, and they have a very extensive club that's been in place for 20 years. And they have a very defined program. But you don't know what you don't know until you see it. And so people with disabilities and veterans organizations, they're not going to participate in water activities until they are introduced to it and see the possibilities. So I applaud what you're doing, and I think it's great. I think we're moving in a very progressive direction, but I think there's more that we can do in working with facility owners and clubs that are in place to encourage people with disabilities or veterans to get on the water.
I think that's a great point, Member Withey. And I think, I'll take that direction to heart, and I think you'll see some of that by October is looking at how we plug into some of those private clubs, operators, and if there's opportunities there, how we amplify and make those things known to people that might not know about them. And I would actually ask the board, Member Jackson, Member Withey, especially, if you see those opportunities, make sure that let staff aware, so we can then connect the people that are looking for those resources with those actual resources. But I appreciate the comment.
I second some of what Member Withey said, and also Josh, commend you and your team for all the work you've done on this. It's really unfortunate that it had to happen in the pandemic year, because I think a lot of the discussions that could have happened or that some of us could have been having with those groups has all been turned into turmoil and chaos right now. There are a couple of programs that I'm aware of in the Portland area for paddle sports and disabled folks, and some rowing for Paralympics type rowing. But all of that is completely on hold right now because of the person-to-person contact stuff for COVID, and just a whole lot of uncertainty in those organizations is what is the new normal, and will we ever get back to the old normal? One thing I was going to throw out also is I believe there's some grants through the VA for medical research on things like PTSD, TBI, and spinal injuries. And I know some organizations in the Boston area have been able to capitalize on that for a bunch of veterans programs. And it might be something between the VA hospital, OHSU, and maybe some of the programs in town to look at.
I will note that. Thank you, Member Jackson. And actually, also on the grant front, it should be mentioned that we would certainly be very supportive of any grant applicants looking to increase opportunities for really any underserved group, and including veterans or those with disabilities. So if you are aware of facility operators or other entities that would be interested in infrastructure or anything that they could do to get others out in the water, I would encourage you all to let them know that there is money available through our grant programs for those things. I mean, those are a high priority for the agency and for our granting folks. So just want to put that out there.
Great, thank you, Josh. Anything else? Okay, we will move on to item F then. Consideration for rulemaking OAR 250-020-0204, boat operations in Klamath County. And Josh, it is still your turn.
Thank you, Chair Early. Item F is a follow-up from an item from the January meeting on Crescent Lake in Klamath County. As you recall, the Klamath County Sheriff's Office requested a small slow-no wake zone in a small cove of that lake to protect boaters and non-boaters alike at an area that is an informal boat launch and also a pretty heavily used area throughout the year. It's the party cove, if you will, of that lake. The information in this request is in the board book. I'm not going to rehash all those details. It's just copied and pasted from the last board book. We solicited comments on the proposal, and all but one supported the sheriff's assessment that this is an area where there's some safety hazards that could be mitigated with some boating regulations. I do want to quickly mention that that item is still on notice through next week, just because of some of the timelines associated with what we have to do for rulemaking and when this board meeting came up. If there are additional comments, especially if there are additional comments against this proposal, we'll certainly bring them to the board. I don't expect those. I think if anything, we'd get more proposals in support of what was requested by the Sheriff's Office. So I'll wrap this one up pretty quickly. I don't believe there's any new information that's been brought forward by any member of the public that would change the course that the board voted on in January. In staff opinion, the creation of this slow no wake zone is a very logical, needed step in the interest of public safety, and the effects on recreational boating are de minimis. So the staff's recommendation is for the board to adopt the rules to establish this slow no wake zone in Crescent Lake with the rules written in the board book. So with that, Chair Early, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you. So there's no problem for us to go ahead and adopt these rules, even though the formal comment period is still open?
So that's a great question, Chair Early, and actually I'll address that in the next item as well, or that will come up in the next item as well. But no, because the rules can't be adopted formally by the agency until the 1st of the month. So no matter what happens at this meeting, the agency does not formally adopt them until May 1st. That's just a construct of how rules have to be filed with the Secretary of State's office. So there has to be a 30-day notice period. By May 1st, we'll be into 45 days or so. So no, that is not a concern. There's no rule violations that we'd be committing by voting today.
Okay, are there any questions then regarding the rulemaking? Or I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the board formally amend OAR 250-020-0204 with the language provided by the staff to establish a no wake zone on Crestland Lake.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to formally adopt the staff recommendation in the book for the rulemaking. Are there any additional comments or questions? Seeing as there is none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, thank you, Josh. And I'll let you continue with the Maintenance Assistance Program grant rules, which is item G.
Sure. Thank you again, Chair Early. The last policy item that I have for you today is in regards to rules around the Maintenance Assistance Grant Program. The Maintenance Assistance Grant Program, known as MAP currently, is one of the small grant programs designed to assist facilities with routine maintenance. So this is not a program for the development of sites. It is that, that's under a different grant program that you as the board weigh into often. This is a much smaller maintenance program. A few years ago, staff began to hear from facility operators that the program requirements that were put in place decades ago, in the 70s or 80s, I believe, we're starting to create some challenges in them participating in the program. And then last year's unique challenges with fires, the ongoing pandemic, it created some additional issues with the current rules. And we found ourselves in the predicament of either not being able to be responsive to the needs of our facility operators or being in violation of our own rules that the Marine Board put in place, again, decades ago. So to reduce the administrative costs to both us and facilities, to align with our current grant programs, and to provide the board actually the opportunity to have a little bit more ongoing input into the administration of our grants, as well as the ranking and criteria used. Staff developed some new rules that were proposed in March, and those are available in your board book right now. Just like the last item, public comments have been and are still being solicited for the past few weeks. At this point, we have received no comments, nor did we expect to. Prior to these even being proposed, I know that Janine and her staff have been in contact with the facility operators that participated in the program. Much of what is currently written for these new rules is a product of conversations between our staff and those facility operators. So we haven't received any comments at all. I really don't expect that we will. However, Janine has pointed out that through more informal conversations with these facility operators that would be participating in this program, that there's been nothing but support. If you want to read through the older rules, again, they're in your board book, and you'll see there's a lot of administrative burden that was creating some challenges for both the agency and for these facility operators. And that was the main reason for going in this new direction. One thing we have heard from some of the facility operators that would like to participate or have participated in this program in the past is that, especially with new rules that might make it easier for them to be part of the program, they'd like some training on just how to do it, how to apply. So I know that our facility staff are planning some virtual trainings to bring some of those facility operators on board, make sure they're comfortable with the program, how to navigate the program, what they need to do, etc. At this point, staff would like to ask the board to approve the new rules as provided. Additionally, if the board has any guidance or suggestions for the administration of this grant program, this is a really good time to let staff know, what you're thinking, what you're looking for. At the next board meeting, you'll have the opportunity to review the grant procedure and policy guide, which is the administrative guiding document for our grant programs going forward. And a lot of our things that were currently passed or previously in rule, we're moving to that document so that It gives it a little more flexibility, and it also allows the board to weigh in every couple years without a formal rulemaking change, which is much more challenging from an administrative standpoint, at least from my standpoint. So again, that will be brought to you at the next meeting, that procedures guide. So this is a great time to bring anything forward. If there are any technical questions about the MAP program at all, I know that Janine is still on the line, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any of those questions. If there's any questions regarding the rules that have been proposed, this is a good time to bring those up now. Yeah, and I'll close with staff would like the board to approve the rules as written in the board book. So again, with that, Chair Early, it's back to you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend both Janine and yourself for the collaborative effort on this. I think that the outreach with the people who utilize this grant program is very important, and to get their guidance on it. I also am very much in favor of maybe developing something in the future that would periodically review some of these older, I guess, guidelines or policies for applying for grants, because we need to make sure that we evolve and don't have something so cumbersome that it is virtually not able to be user friendly. Virtual trainings would be fabulous, I'm sure, for an online, to create an online training mechanism for people to be able to do that and take advantage of this program.
Thank you, Chair. Those are great points. And I would point out that, you saw waterway access grant rules. I think that was last fall. And now this is the next grant program that we're closely taking a look at, because you hit the nail on the head. I mean, much of our current grant rules, which are actually rules, are simply just not reflective of 2021 and how technology changes, how needs change, how the program has changed. So after we get through with the maintenance assistant grant program, there are plans to look at some of the other grant programs and ultimately all get them aligned to this kind of new format. Put a lot of the criteria, the policies into that procedure document, so it's more of a living document that the board can interact with, and we can adapt to these changes. Because again, when we got into situations with the fires this year, we found ourselves, our grant rules as written right now are actually very restrictive for ourselves. And it created some problems with flexibility, and we'd like to avoid that in the future. So thank you for that point, Chair.
And we've seen this come up in the past also. So I know that there have been facilities that have dropped their application for maintenance program funds because they were so cumbersome. So I think it's really, really important to continue to maintain those facilities even that we have funded, even if they're no longer under contract. And this is a great way to do it. Other board members, anybody else? Craig?
No, I certainly agree, and I encourage Josh, the staff, to look at other grant programs, if you stated, and make them much easier for people to utilize. So I applaud you for doing that. And I'll just go ahead and make a motion that the board approve the proposed rules as written by the staff for the maintenance assistant grant program.
This is Colleen, second.
Colleen or Laura, anybody have any questions or comments?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. Well, then all those in favor of the motion currently on the table, please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Josh, very much. Glad to see this.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. Nice to see you today.
Okay, so we are down to item 8, which is the board meeting timeline. So, Director Warren.
Yes, Chair Early. First, I just have to say Colleen's background's made me not want to be at work all day. So, got sunshine, and then I see the river, and I just think, what are we doing having a board meeting on Zoom or Team, I guess. So, but On item H, one of the things that we implemented a couple meetings ago was really trying to forecast what was coming up next. It was a way to hold ourselves as staff accountable, way to let the board know what we were going to talk about so that we were talking about the things that you wanted. So everything is flexible, and I think a few things that we need today. I know, Charlie, you'd mentioned there may be that you have a conflict on the next board date, so some discussion about that. From staff perspective, we talked about the fact that we were planning on bringing back a statewide voter and disability work session, but we're not entirely sure what the board wants on that, and we've wondered if it might fit better with October when some of the timings of the things that Josh has talked about. We certainly can prepare something in June, but we didn't know if the board wanted more of a facilities discussion, a follow-on to South Twin, more of information on what Josh and his team has worked on. So we could use some guidance on how the board would like to use that time. And then we have a few other things that will happen in June. We'll do a board election, or a chair. You all will do a board chair election, and then executive session to review me. And then staff would also like to talk to you about some of the legislative stuff for 2023. It's hard to believe we have to think about that. But come October, we'll be looking for some guidance, so we want to have those conversations with you earlier. And we envision bringing back some of the safety discussions we had at the last meeting, any areas around. I know Josh has some thoughts around invasive species, and not looking for any decisions that day, but really trying to see where the board wants us to go with our 2023 legislative agenda. So that was a lot. Could use input again on specifically on the work session time and the date, I guess.
Thank you, Director. I do have a conflict with the 16th, which was the proposed meeting. I have a previous all-day meeting, or at least it's supposed to be all day on that day itself. I can go before that. I can go after that. How is the rest of the board schedule?
I also have a conflict on the 15th in the afternoon. So I think that was the time that was scheduled for the work sessions on a lot of the stuff and not the actual meeting, if I am correct.
Yes, if we are going to do a work session. But regardless, I think that this meeting will be longer than just a morning because we're going to be dealing with grants.
Right.
So the following week, I know that staff has quite a few conflicts with that.
So we
first
could
of all,
do it
let's
on the go ahead.
well, first of all, let's deal with the work session portion of it. I'm in agreement with the director that I would like to see us go through the summer before we have a work, because I want to see the stuff that Josh is incorporating into the summer with the disabilities. But that's just my feeling. How does everybody else feel about a work session with that?
I tend to agree. Plus, my other concern about just what are organizations and what opportunities are going to happen in the new era, the post-COVID era, that we'll have, I think, better clarity when we get to October.
Craig, you were speaking?
Yeah, the genesis, I think, on this was how do we give a placard or a license for people with disabilities or veterans to operate a boat with electric motor. That was one of them. And the second one was developing some training just for the board and for others on what a disability program is and what it looks like. There's facility access needs and requirements. There's program access needs and requirements. So I don't know if that's developed yet or are people ready to discuss it. I don't see a problem with holding it off until October because I think we're still in the COVID dilemma, as Laura points out. So I'm okay with delaying it, and it sounds like we need to give more definition to it anyway.
And it sounds like perhaps if things go right, according to the governor, we may be able to meet in person in October. Director, what's your thoughts?
Oh boy, I've almost given up guessing, but I did see something this morning that looked like state offices were going to get some direction that around September 1st we'd start opening back up more normally. Of course, all that caveat is things could change. So I think there is a possibility that we could have an in-person meeting for those that are comfortable in October doing that. I think it seems like that's the direction we'll be headed. And Craig's point about more direction, even hearing some of those thoughts, Craig, are helpful. I think, I heard, the facility, kind of an education overview for board members around some of the facility design and how a program would look. A little bit of a pick back up of the South Twin issue that was dealt with singularly, but maybe is there a more statewide need to address some of those through, you articulated that to me through the licensing piece. So we would be certainly able to put something together by June. I feel like it would be more complete work by October, but
well, it sounds to me like, people are the board is pretty much in agreement that, with a little bit more direction, October would work, as long as that's not going to be too much for a work session with the other items that we would be considering at that time.
Charlie, I think as long as we plan a day and a half on that October board meeting, we should be fine with that. So, and then I would just say, we've gotten some good direction, but I know I can hear Josh chiming in my ear of we could use more. And so what I'll say is that Josh and myself, we may reach out to some of you individually, probably all of you individually, and just make sure that as we prepare that October training, it's covering the areas that you're interested in specific to this, because I know all of you come from different voting backgrounds and represent different user groups. And, for instance, Craig mentioned some of the things that they're doing with sailing out there in other states. And I know Laura's very familiar with that, but we also, so is Colleen. She did some youth sailing in the cruising communities. They divide themselves up by who's got a sail and who's got power, but Colleen's got connections into all those clubs. And so it'd be interesting to hear her thoughts as well and what she'd like. And Val, I know you've got ideas on what other states have done with guides. So we'll reach out to each of you individually probably in the next month so that we can plan that October time to be more useful, if that makes sense for everybody.
I think that's a great idea because yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The only problem is we're not sharing ideas collectively. So, like I have a lot of ideas and I don't want to dominate everything. So I want to be able to have other people participate and us come to an understanding of what we're looking for. I don't know how we do that without a board meeting.
And you're free to, discuss it out here. That if you want to have more discussion on that, Craig, feel free. It's the last agenda item today, so as much direction and discussion as you want to have on it would be fine for us. I know folks are taking notes and listening. So,
well, there's a lot of opportunities in the Portland area. That's where you have the largest population in the state. So there's clubs and organizations there that I think need to reach out to, as we've discussed earlier. But we also need to show them at the same time what's possible, what's out there. So I'm interested in us as a board getting together and understanding what's possible, what can be done with facilities, what can be done with programs and stuff. That may involve bringing somebody who's in these programs, somebody from Seattle who's with an adaptive sailing club up there down here to present it to us or discuss it with us. So that's just one avenue. And I'd also like, as we discussed, at another time, Larry, about having facility owners get on board with modifying their facilities. How do we engage them? How do we do that? You know, Willie, I think, is a great resource, as we saw with his initiative on a Duckworth dock. And he has contacts in communities that we don't have, that he could persuade programs or facility owners to initiate new programs. How do we tie all that into a work session? I'm not sure, but it may involve bringing in other people who have programs in place and giving presentations to us. So that's just some of my ideas.
Those all seem like something we could definitely work on. And we've got some things going on in the state that might even be interesting. I know Brian Carroll, some of you may remember him, he used to be on the board. He's had a couple rowboats built that are wheelchair accessible, and then they found their little problem of getting people on the boat. So he's here in the next near bit, he's getting a group together to go out and work on some facility designs for those. So there's an example in our own state of somebody who's trying to do something different that others could learn from.
And some of those issues have already been dealt with in other communities. Like I use Chesapeake Bay. They've been in the business of adaptive sailing for 20 years. So they've overcome a lot of that, and we need to see what that is and then share that information with facility owners and other programs, so they're not trying to reinvent the wheel or make the same mistakes those established programs have already gone through.
Yeah, we can certainly reach out to other programs, and I'd be surprised if we couldn't find one that would be willing to present to the board. Sounds like there's enough of them out there doing different things that somebody I'm sure would love to come and tell their great story. People usually like to talk about those successes and share them. So I'm sure we could find a sailing club that's doing something that would talk with us, and at the same time also check in with Colleen and Laura and see if there's anything in Oregon going on that we might not know about that we want to highlight as well. So
exactly.
Yeah, and there are some disabled guides out there that would have some input into facilities, you know, things that would make it a more user friendly for them also.
And I think a training session for the board should be part of whatever we do. So the board itself understands what accessibility needs and requirements of veterans are, and how we as a board can support them.
So it sounds like we'll go ahead and just keep working through that and have that in October then. So then the next question would be doing the meeting for June. So the afternoon of the 15th is bad for Laura. At least the morning of the 16th is bad for me. Craig, you were making a suggestion?
Well, why don't we do it on the 14th then?
So Director, how does a Monday work for you guys?
We work Mondays, so if that's that, we'd be ready to go. I think we would be just fine with that.
That Monday is Flag Day. Is that an issue with the state?
That is not an issue for us.
Okay.
Just in case, I don't, you know, with the grants, we have people coming from the outside, usually presenting. So Janine, if for some reason the 14th is a problem that I'm not thinking of, let me know. But I think we could make the 14th work. Yep, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we will work on the 14th of June unless we hear otherwise. So if that is all on agenda item number 8, then we are going to get to the final order of business here, which is other business. Did any of the other board members have something? So at this time, is Rachel still on the call? Director?
Chair Early, we had her watching the public feed to make sure that if there was any challenges, she could let us know right away. So she is probably watching the public feed and doesn't have access to talk onto the meeting, would be my guess.
Okay. Well, then, if she is watching the public feed, I'm not even on it, so I bet they can hear me.
Yes, they can.
Okay, I would like to present Rachel Graham with a coin for her professionalism and for her help through all of these transitions and through this time. And I just wanted to do that now, and then I will have probably a slew of coins to present at the next meeting, but I wanted to get it rolling with this one for Rachel.
Excellent, Chair Early, and if we'll make sure she gets that coin and understands that, you know, you were wanting to acknowledge her for that, and then if she wasn't able to listen live for some reason, then we'll make sure she goes back and hears the recording. And I would echo that sentiment. She's done a lot of good for the agency in the 10 years she's been here, and in a variety of roles, and really has done a great job for the organization.
And I would like to add my endorsement. I think she's done superior work, and the board is able to function because of the effort that she's put into it.
Okay, well, if there is no other business before the board, then is somebody speaking? Sorry,
No,
I get
I
a
was
little
just
bit of
clicking
feedback
my
once in
hands.
a while. No hands up? Okay, well, the April 14th meeting for the Oregon State Marine Board is officially adjourned.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for your
Bye,
patience.
everyone. Take care.
Get out on the water this afternoon.
Yes. Yes.